Hello everyone and welcome to Simplilearn's YouTube channel. Kaushal this side and I hope you guys are doing well. It is rightly said that you can master a programming language only by programming in it. And it's also correct that if you want to code, then there's no better thing to do than to work on projects. So in this video, we'll take you through some of the best projects you can work on if you are a Java enthusiast. But before we begin, if you enjoy watching these videos and find them interesting, then subscribe to our YouTube channel because we bring the best videos for you daily. Also hit the bell icon to never miss any updates from Simplilearn. So let's go through the agenda for today's video. We'll start this video with an introduction to Java programming, followed by the skills and salary of a Java developer. We'll then move on to the Java development kit and the process of installing Java in your systems. These topics are discussed to make everyone comfortable with the version of Java that is being used in today's video. Then we'll move on to the top 10 project ideas for 2024. Once we finish all these topics, we'll start with some basic pattern programs in Java. And then we'll move on to the main Java projects, where we'll create applications like a calculator app and an ATM application with Java. Following that, we'll also cover the advanced Java projects using Spring Boot. And finally, if you also want to become a Java developer, you should know the questions you might tackle in an interview. Speaking of interviews, we have covered you along with the most frequently asked Java interview questions to help you crack the most challenging interviews. Also, if you want to become a successful software developer and gain handsome salary packages, then look at this wide range of software development courses by Simplilearn in collaboration with the top universities across the globe. By enrolling in any of these certification programs, you will master modern coding techniques with bootcamp level intensity, becoming a full-stack Java technologist. These programs lay the foundation for crafting full-stack web applications. So, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and enroll now. A year of experience is preferred to enroll in these courses, so check out the link mentioned in the description box below for more details. So without any further delay, let's hand over this session to our training experts.
In today's era, the internet and smartphones have become an integral part of our lives. We use our phones for almost all of our day-to-day tasks. Earlier, we used to shop at malls, queue up in front of banks, and make our travel bookings at travel agencies. But now, we can do all this in the comfort of our homes using smartphones. All of this is possible because of a high-level programming language called Java. Hi guys, welcome to this video that will tell you everything you need to know about the class-based, object-oriented programming language Java. Java is an object-oriented programming language that is used in a distributed environment on the internet. It is a high-level language that is easy to read and understand. Java is popularly used in console, graphical user interface, web and mobile applications, game development, and also to make embedded systems. Apart from these, Java is also used to develop software for devices. It is used not only in computers and mobiles, but even in electronic devices like televisions, washing machines, air conditioners, and so on. Online forms, banking, and shopping are possible because of Java. Java is a computer-based programming language invented by James Gosling and Sun Microsystems in 1991. He had a single motto while creating the language. It was write once, run anywhere. This meant that the code would have to be written only once, but it could be used anywhere. They named this language Oak because of the oak tree outside Gosling's office. Later, it was named to Green, then to Java Coffee, which was named after the coffee from Indonesia, and finally to Java in 1995. There are 3 editions of Java. Each programmer can learn any of these editions based on the application they want to make. Firstly, we have Java Standard Edition. This edition contains core libraries like java.lang, java.util, etc. Secondly, we have Java Enterprise Edition. This edition has APIs like JMS, EJB, JSP, servlets, etc. And lastly, we have Java Micro Edition, which is used to program Java in cell phones, set-top boxes, handhelds, and so on. Java is an object-oriented programming language based on C and C++. However, it is improved and simplified to solve the errors in programming. Java files are converted to bitcode format using a compiler and then executed by the Java interpreter. The whole Java code is run on the Java virtual machine, which provides a runtime environment. Now the main concepts in Java are its methods and classes. A method is a block of code that performs a task only when it is called. Consider this example. While watching TV, you use the TV remote to change channels. Each button on the remote performs a different task. Methods in Java are the same. We can have methods to add two numbers or email a person or to convert kilometers to meters. A group of methods make a class. Classes are used to organize code just like how fruits, vegetables and clinical products are divided into different sections in a supermarket. There are a lot of features in Java. Let's start by looking at them one by one. It has a simple syntax and is very easy to understand and learn. Java language is robust. It eliminates errors that occur in the C and C++ languages. Java also has features like garbage collectors and exception handling. This makes Java very unique. The most popular feature of Java is that it is platform independent. Here, compilation happens in bytecode, and because of this, Java can run on any machine. It is a very secure language as it contains no virus. Java has a feature of multi-threading. The feature of multi-threading helps Java do multitasking. Java is a portable language as it can run on any platform, and data type sizes are set permanently. So Java program has a fixed size of the code. The last of all, Java is not as fast as C and C++, but provides higher performance than any other language. Now let's see OOPS concepts in Java. Java has 4 concepts: abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. In Java, we use objects and classes related to the real world that makes the code easier to make and understand. Abstraction means showing the relevant information that is needed for a task. Encapsulation makes the Java code secure. Data is stored within the classes, and it is not easy to access the data. The next feature is inheritance. As the name suggests, the attributes and characteristics of one class can be inherited by another class. Because of this, coders take less time to create the code. Lastly, we have polymorphism, which means using the same method for different tasks. In Java, we can use the same object or variable in 2 different places where their tasks will differ.
Who is a Java developer? So Java developer basically is a professional computer software developer who uses Java programming language to build the software. Now Java developer mainly uses Java to build software for desktops, mobile phones, and also develop software for similar electronic devices such as a smartphone, tablet, etc. Now to become a Java developer, we need to have at least a bachelor's degree in relevant stream, preferably computer science. Later you might want to join an internship or a training exercise that involves a project or some highly recognized certification like Oracle Certified Java Developer. Then your dream job in your dream company. So this was a simple walkthrough or roadmap to become a Java developer. Now moving ahead, we have our main topic for today's discussion, that is the skills required to become a Java developer. Now we shall categorize this into 2 stages. One is the beginner and the other is the professional. We shall discuss each one of them separately. So first we will start with the beginner. So these will be the basic skills that any interviewer will be expecting out from a pure beginner. So in the beginners section, the first skill that we will be discussing is related to the object-oriented programming concepts in Java. So for a beginner, the concepts of object-oriented programming in Java play a very important and vital role for an interview. So he or she should be having a strong grip over the object-oriented programming concepts in Java. So followed by object-oriented programming concepts in Java, we have the next important concept in Java, which is the file input and output operations and serialization. So serialization is another way of executing your code from a different place. For example, if you write a code and you wanted to execute the same code in a different place in a different computer, all you can do is just serialize your code to that particular system and there the same code will be executed. So followed by the second point, the third important skill we need to have is the good understanding of data structures in Java. Data structures or Java collections are the most crucial parts of programming. So for a beginner, it's really important that you have a good grip over all the Java collections. So followed by that, the next important skill you require is to learn how to handle exceptions. So exception handling plays a vital role in real-time programming. So you better have that. Next, after exception handling, we have the good understanding of JVM and memory management. So JVM basically is the Java virtual machine. So what happens in Java is you write a code and that particular code is compiled and converted into bytecode. So this bytecode will be transferred to JVM and then JVM executes your bytecode and results in an output. So you need to have the good understanding of JVM and the memory management concepts in Java for a beginner level. So followed by that, the next important thing is multi-threading and synchronization in Java. So all those were the basic and important crucial skills required by a beginner if you're attending for an interview, because these are the basic skills that every interviewer will be looking out in a beginner. So let's have a quick overview of the skill set again. So for a beginner level, the major skill sets that you require are to have a good understanding of object-oriented concepts in Java. Next, the file input and operations and serialization concepts in Java. Good understanding of data structures or collections in Java. Exception handling, JVM or Java Virtual Machine and memory management, and finally multi-threading and synchronization. So these were the major skills that are required by a beginner. Now followed by the skill set, we will have another slide that depicts about the IDEs that you must be comfortable with. So for a beginner, these are the basic IDEs that you should be comfortable with, which are IntelliJ, Eclipse and NetBeans, and also these are the mainly used IDEs in real-time programming as well. So if you are comfortable with these three IDEs, then it will be an added weight to your resume. So followed by the beginner, we enter into the next level, which is the experience level. So this is really important. So we have multiple skills required by an experienced level candidate. So the first one amongst the important skills required by an experienced level candidate are a good knowledge of big data and artificial intelligence. Yes, you heard me right, artificial intelligence. There is a major misconception that R and Python are the only languages that are built for artificial intelligence and data science. But in reality, even Java can perform the artificial intelligence, data science and machine learning jobs using the new libraries which are dedicatedly written for the purpose. Now for an advanced or experienced level candidate, the knowledge of these libraries and the workflow is really important. So followed by that, the next important skill required by an experienced level candidate is a good understanding of blockchain. Next, after the blockchain, there are multiple big data frameworks out there which you need to learn. Next, after that, we have microservices, Spring Boot, and scripting languages such as AngularJS, ReactJS, and JavaScript. So let's have a quick overview of the skill set required by an experienced level candidate. So those are AI and ML libraries in Java, good understanding of blockchain, Hadoop and big data frameworks, Spring Boot, microservices, and finally advanced scripting programming languages like AngularJS, JavaScript, and ReactJS. Now these skill sets might look big, complex, complicated, and hard to digest, but Java developers are categorized into multiple streams of development. Just for example, we can see Java developers working over web development, Android development, full stack, big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and many more. Now let us consider three most popular streams where we find Java developers, which are the web development areas, Android development areas, and finally the full stack development areas. So first we will discuss the skill set required by a web developer. So for a web developer, these are the major skill sets required, which are the good knowledge of Java Servlet Pages or JSP, popular markup languages such as XML, HTML, and next after that we have Model View Controller. So one should have a good understanding of Model View Controller or MVC architecture. Followed by that we have good knowledge of web technologies like CSS and JavaScript, and finally Java applets. So the important frameworks for a web developer to be well versed with are Apache Struts, Play, Google Web Toolkit, and finally Grails. So these are the popular frameworks that are currently in trend and used by Java web developers. So followed by the web developer, next we have is the Android developer. So an Android developer is a software developer who specializes in designing applications for Android Marketplace. The Android Marketplace is a direct competitor to Apple's App Store. This means most of the Android developers' job revolves around creating apps that we use on our smartphones and tablets. Now, the skill sets required by Android developer are good grip over the Android SDK or software development kit. Next, the Android testing, followed by that a better understanding of Android API and database connectors like JDBC and Android security, and finally Git version control. Now, Git version control will be really helpful to keep your code updated. Now, followed by the skills required by an Android developer, we will go through some important frameworks and user interface development software tools required by an Android developer in real time. First, let us discuss the user interface development tools like Flutter and React.js, which are the most popular ones amongst the others. So React.js is an open source front-end JavaScript library for building user interfaces or UI components. It is maintained by Facebook and a community of individual developers and companies. React can be used as a base in the development of single page or mobile applications. So next after React.js we have the Flutter. Flutter is an open source user interface software development kit created by Google. It is used to develop applications for Android, iOS, Linux, Mac, Windows, Google, and many more from a single code base. So next we have the Solar 2D. Solar 2D is a free and open source cross-platform software development kit. And then we have the Android Studio, that is another popular development kit just for Android. Now next in the docket is the Java full stack developer. A full stack web developer is a person who can develop both client and server software. In addition to mastering HTML and CSS, he or she also knows how to program a browser like using JavaScript, jQuery, Angular, and Vue. So now the major skill sets required by a full stack developer are having a good understanding of software design and architecture, understanding of DevOps, knowledge of microservices, APIs and libraries, design patterns in Java, React and Angular, scripting languages, and finally should be capable to work on front end and back end. So these were the major skills required by a full stack developer. So followed by this, we shall also discuss the major frameworks required by a full stack developer. So these are the major tools, frameworks, and scripting languages that are supposed to be known by a full stack developer. We have the integration tools such as Jenkins and DevOps related tools like Kubernetes and Docker, and scripting languages like Angular and React, and frameworks like Spring, and testing tools like JUnit. So with this, we will move ahead into our next important topic, that is the roles and responsibilities of a Java developer. So first we will discuss the roles and responsibilities of a Java developer at beginner level. So the important roles and responsibilities for a beginner are to be able to define the objectives by analyzing the requirements of the clients, followed by that to be capable enough to complete the assigned job before the deadlines, design and test basic codes, resolve the reported issues in time, and troubleshoot the code, improvise the existing code quality, and finally support the user with proper documentation of the code. So these were the important responsibilities of a Java developer at beginner level. Now let us advance to the next level where we will discuss the roles and responsibilities of experienced level candidates. So the roles and responsibilities of an advanced level or experienced level candidate are all the basic responsibilities of a beginner. So followed by the basic responsibilities, an advanced level Java programmer should be having a thorough knowledge of system functionality and features. Followed by that, the experienced level Java programmer should be able to design and develop user interface, enhance the reputation of the company, recommend updates based on the performance, ensure the best possible responsiveness, and finally explore and add value to the achievements of fellow co-workers. So these were the important roles and responsibilities of a Java developer both at beginner level and experienced level. Now let us check out the companies which are looking for Java developers. There are many companies that are looking for Java developers in the current IT industry. Some of the major MNCs looking out for Java developers in the current IT industry are Cognizant, Infosys, Oracle, Capgemini, Dell, Amazon, Wipro, Mphasis, and Accenture. Now that we have discussed the companies hiring Java developers, let us take a step further and discuss the salary trends of the Java developers in the current IT industries. Now let us discuss the salary trends of Java developers in India first. So the salary trends for a Java developer who is going through the beginner level or an internship level start from 2 lakh to 4 lakh rupees per annum. Similarly, for an experienced level Java developer, the salary trends start from 5 lakh and go up to 10 lakhs and above based on your experience level and skill set. Now let us go ahead and discuss the next country, which is the United States of America. So for a Java developer at beginner level, America offers $55,000 to $80,000 per annum. Similarly, for an experienced level candidate, America offers $85,000 to $1,25,000 per annum based on the experience and skill set. Now finally we have the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom offers £45,000 to £60,000 for a Java developer at a beginner level, and similarly for an experienced level Java developer, United Kingdom offers £65,000 to £85,000 per annum. So these were the salary trends of Java developers in multiple countries. So if you wish to join the right training exercise that covers the complete skill set according to the standards of top MNCs curated and explained in a detailed manner by real-time industry experts, then Simplilearn would be the right choice. If you visit the Simplilearn official website for Java related training, then you can find the Simplilearn has beautifully organized all the major topics of Java in a result oriented manner that will be helpful for both beginners and professionals. So the key features of Java training offered by Simplilearn will have 70 hours of blended training, hands-on coding and implementation of 2 web-based projects. It also includes Hibernate and Spring frameworks, 35 coding-related exercises on core Java, and lifetime access of self-paced training, and finally, the flexibility to choose your own classes. So the benefits of Java certification training offered by Simplilearn will have the following. You can achieve your designation of becoming a Java architect, Java developer, database administrator, or web developer with the certification from Simplilearn on Java. So the average salaries for a Java developer with certification will be varying from 16 lakhs as minimum and will also reach up to the maximum of 27 lakhs per annum. The Java certification from Simplilearn is being recognized by multiple multinational companies, and some of the major MNC companies that are hiring Java developers with the certification of Java are Wells Fargo, Oracle, Accenture, Citibank, and many more. Now we have the 3 varieties of training options, which are self-paced learning, online bootcamp, and corporate training.
So what is Java? It is a fast, reliable, and secure programming language that can be used in several websites and applications. It can be used to create applications in a single computer or one that could be distributed across several servers and clients. Java can be used in several scenarios, independent of the system that it is used on. So let's look into what Java Development Kit means. All the Java applications and applets are developed using the Java Development Kit, that is JDK. Now, the JDK consists of the Java runtime environment, an interpreter, a compiler, an archiver, and a document generator, and a few more tools that go into developing a Java program. So now let us have a look at the components of JDK. Java Runtime Environment (JRE) primarily is a part of JDK, and it can also be termed as Java RTE. The JDK provides the minimal amount of requirements needed to write and compile a Java program. JRE consists of the JVM, supporting files, and the core classes. The JVM is key to both JDK and the JRE because it is embedded into them. Now, whichever Java program is being run, the JVM is that component of Java that executes a program line by line, thus giving itself the work of an interpreter. We are now in a position to deep dive into the process with which JDK, JRE, and JVM work. Let's take a source file and save it with the extension .java. This file is compiled and converted into a set of bytecode which changes the file extension into .class. This is done specifically by the JDK. Now, here are the steps that follow. Class loader. It makes sure that all the necessary classes are loaded in the time of the execution of a program. Next, bytecode verifier, that is JVM. The bytecode verifier checks the code for errors or irregularities based on access rights on objects or implementation of pointers. It makes sure that the code fulfills the specifications of JVM and does not break the system integrity. And finally, interpreter, which is JVM. Now, while running the program, the interpreter loads, checks, and runs the code. The implementation is made by the JRE, which is the final process. The latest release is JDK 9 and it was released in October 2017. But it was in JDK 8 that a new feature called the Java Lambda expression was introduced that changed the face of Java. Now, Java Lambda expression is a kind of function which does not need any class to be created. It has been included in the latest version of JDK as it provides a clear, concise way to pass functions around. This also replaces earlier bulky anonymous classes and reduces code verbosity, that is, the length of the code. The syntax for the Lambda expression is this: argument list, arrow token, body. Now the syntax consists of three components, which are argument list. This can be empty or non-empty. Next, the arrow token. Now this is used to link argument to body. And finally, body. This contains the statement that works with the function. Let us now just see an example of using Lambda expression and contrasting it with how code would have been written with anonymous classes. This is the old method and this is the new method with Lambda expression. Just have a look at how Lambda expression syntax has been used over here. The JDK 9 has been released recently and it seems promising with respect to new features and abilities. Here are some of the features. The first one is Java Platform Module System. This module allows strong encapsulation and declare explicit dependencies. Next, JShell. With the help of JShell, one can directly start writing the code on the console and execute them. Improved Java Doc. Java docs have got the search right in the API documentation, and as an added bonus, the output is also compliant to HTML5. Next, Stream API. The Stream API, also introduced in Java 8, allows programmers to easily parallelize code for improved concurrency and introduces functional programming abilities to the language. The Stream API, in conjunction with Lambda expressions, also comes in handy while iterating, filtering, and extracting large amount of data. The release of multi-jar makes it possible for codes to be run on the newer versions of JDK to be released.
So now let's download Java. Let's go to Google and search for Java download. We'll go to the link we see here, oracle.com. So now here we have the web page. Here we can see Java SE 13. So this is version 13, but this isn't the one we are going to download. We are going to download the 8th version, version 8, which is here. Now we're doing this because 8 is one of the more commonly used versions of Java. So let's click this. And here we'll go down. We need to accept the license agreement before we can download it. Now we have two versions here, x86 and x64. Now you can download it depending on what version your operating system is. Now if you do have a Windows 10 operating system, it's highly likely you have a 64-bit version of Windows. Now if you do have a 32-bit version of Windows, you can take the x86. So let's download this. So we've actually already logged in, so we just need to run the installer file now. Let's go to downloads and run the file. So here we have the installer. We'll go to the next step. We'll select this to next. Here we can see where the file is being installed to. We'll go to next. Now if you want to change where you want to install Java, we can press the change option. I'm just going to keep it here. We'll press next and let's commence with installation. And there we go. The installation is now complete. So we don't need any tutorials or API documentation. So we'll just finish off and go to close. Now to see if Java is installed in your system, we can go to command prompt and type the term javac. which refers to the Java compiler. Now, as you can see here, this shows a number of different options you can choose from. This also indicates that Java has been successfully installed in your system. Now, if the installation was not successful, you'll see something like Javac is not recognized as an internal or external command, operable program, or batch file. But since we've done it successfully, this is what will be shown. Now we're going to set an environment variable. Now, what exactly is an environment variable? Now, assume you have a file which has a .java extension. This environment variable tells the computer that the Java program needs to be called to run this particular file. So, to set the environment variable, we'll need to go to Control Panel. Here, go into System and Security. Go to System and select Advanced System Settings. And then this shows up. Now, before we go into environment variables, we'll need to go to where the Java file was installed. So let's go to this PC, C drive, program files, and here let's go to Java. So let's go to JDK, which is the Java Development Kit. Let's go to bin here and copy this path. We'll go back to environment variables, select path here, and then press on new, paste this, and OK. Now we'll go back and go to JRE, to the path of JRE, which is Java Runtime Environment. We click on this, bin again, and copy this path. Select this one, new, and paste that. And there we go, the environment variables are now set. Now let's talk about running that simple program I told you about. Now this is possible with the help of an IDE. An IDE, or Integrated Development Environment, will give us a platform to code Java. We will be using Eclipse and IntelliJ as they are popular and commonly used. That being said, there are several other IDEs that are available in the market. So now let's work with Eclipse. Let's go to Google and search for Eclipse. We'll go to this link, press download. And then this shows up. Let's click on download. Now we've already downloaded the software, so I'm just going to directly go into the install phase. Downloads and select Eclipse. With this, you can see that there are multiple options for you to choose from. So we're going to select Eclipse IDE for Java developers. Now you have other options like for C and C++, JavaScript, PHP, and so on. But let's go to the first one. And here you have the details. You can change them if you want. But I'm just going to go ahead with installation now. Press accept now. Here we remember accepted licenses and press accept. And then here as well, we'll remember accepted certificates. Select this one and accept selected. And there you go, the installation is now complete. Let's click on launch now. So here we are setting up a directory as a workspace. I'm not changing it here, so I'm just going to go with launch. Here we have the Eclipse workspace. Now let's close this first. And here we have the package explorer. Now in case this doesn't show up, you can go to window, show view, and select on package explorer. So now let's go to file, new, and Java project. We need to set up a project name. I'm going to call it my project 1. Go to next. We'll go to source. So this is where the source code for your program is going to be stored. Then let's finish. And now we'll click on my project 1, go to source, right click, new, and create a class. I'll name the class my class and create it. And here we have it. So now let's write a simple program to multiply two numbers. So now let's write the main function. Open bracket. Now we're going to initialize the first number. Now the second one. And finally the output. And finally the variable that will store the output. Now we'll just give them a simple print statement. Now let's run the code by clicking this option here using myclass.java. And there we have it. Here the product is shown to be 100, indicating that the program is running successfully. Now we're done with Eclipse. Now let's move on to the other IDE I was talking about, which is IntelliJ. So for that, again, we'll have to go back to Google so that we can download it. Search for IntelliJ download. Go to this link here. So here you can see that we have two options, the Ultimate Edition and the Community version. Now here the Ultimate version has way more options, as you can see here, but it's a paid version and only has a free trial. Now the Community version is free, so that's what we're going to take. So we'll click on download here. So I've already downloaded the software, so I don't need to do it again. So I'm going to go to downloads, and so here we go. Let's just click on next. Select the location where you want to install it. Press next. Now we will add a 64-bit launcher shortcut on the desktop and create associations. So basically this means that these are the different file extensions that this will support. So .java, .groovy. And now let's go to the next step. We'll install now and we'll wait. And there we go. The installation is now complete. Let's not import any settings. We'll accept the privacy policy. We'll set defaults. Now let's create a new project. So here make sure your project SDK is set to the version of Java you've installed. Make sure this isn't blank. We'll go to next. Here you need to select this option, which is the create project from template, and we are now going to create a command line application. Press next. Name the project, which I'm going to call my project 2. You can change the location if you want. I'm just going to keep it the way it is, and then click on finish. So now we're going to create a simple program through which, based on the user's input, we can determine whether a number is even or odd. So first we're going to import the package scanner through which we can take the user's input. Next, let's go inside here. Let's create the variable reader. Now let's ask for the user's input. Enter a number. We're taking in the value now in the variable num. Reader dot next int. So this is with which we'll be taking in the value from the user. So we're going to set up a condition to determine whether the number is even or not. So if the number when divided by 2 provides the remainder 0, it indicates that it's an even number. We'll show them then. Now for the else case, the number is not even. Or in this case, odd. There we go. We're done. So let's run this program. So let's enter 12. The number is even. And there we go, we have a successful output. This indicates that the program is running successfully.
Now we'll move ahead from beginners to advanced level Java projects. So let's start with the first Java project, online banking. Online banking has changed the way banks usually function. It brought the most of time-consuming procedures like money transfer, RTGS, and NEFT to account holders' fingertips. Most of the national and multinational banks use internet banking these days. Experience details in one such project added to your resume would give a positive impact to your profile. An online banking system is a model, a banking site that helps customers to perform bank transactions through a phone or laptop. The project would be performing the following operations: homepage of the online banking site, creation of new accounts, login, logout, manage profile and password, view the balance of the account, deposit the amount, withdraw the amount, transfer the amount, and close account. Tools you prefer while working in online banking are Java, JavaScript, and Oracle. So let's move on to our second project, which is Currency Converter. This Java project serves as a fundamental tool for currency conversion, allowing users to seamlessly switch between different currencies through a web-based interface. An example scenario involves converting US dollars to Indian rupees, showcasing its practical applications. This project, resembling a calculator, utilizes Java servlets, Ajax, and Applet to create an interactive web application. It updates currency value fluctuations and conversion rates regularly, ensuring users are always in the loop. These applications offer a convenient solution primarily employed in business, stock markets, and financial sectors where daily currency exchange and money transfer occurs. Technologies utilized: Java programming language and Ajax. The next project on the list is an online examination system. Most schools, colleges, universities, and even government and private offices have switched from traditional paper-based examinations to online examination. Due to the widespread applications, the project should be capable of some functionalities including login, update profile and password, selecting answers for MCQs, writing answers to the questions, and closing sessions and logout. Tools you prefer to work on online examination project is JavaScript. Next on the list is an airline reservation system. This Java project is developed to facilitate customers in the seamless online booking of tickets, offering features such as checking seat availability, accessing flight arrival details, selecting preferred classes, and reserving seats for both national and international flights. This Java project efficiently filters flight details, include timings and available seats by consolidating data from various airlines through globally distributed systems. Once customer details are entered, the system prompts the user to choose a flight with a preferred time slot, proceed with the payment, and complete the ticket booking. Technology is utilized: Core Java, HTML, JavaScript, and SQL database. Moving forward, let's discuss some of the intermediate level Java projects. Number 5 on the list is a Flappy Bird game. The Flappy Bird game stands out as a straightforward Java-based gaming application where the primary character, a bird, endeavors to reach its destination by navigating through various obstacles. The utilization of the string component in Java proves to be an ideal choice for this gaming scenario. The game increments the count by 1 each time the bird successfully passes a hurdle, while also tracking the elapsed time. A collision with any obstacle results in the termination of the game. Technologies used: Java, Java Swing, Java AWT, and object-oriented programming concepts. Next on the list is a snake game. Recall those nostalgic moments when the snake game on Nokia mobile phones was a popular pastime. This snake game can be entirely realized through Java, incorporating a MySQL database and boasting a comprehensive graphical user interface. The game commences with a snake whose length increases with every food consumed. Navigation involves the snake turning left or right at 90-degree angles. The snake's journey concludes upon collision with a wall or any obstacle encountered along it. Technologies utilized are Java, MySQL database, JDBC, and JavaScript. Now moving on to number 7, we have an exam seating arrangement system. The exam seating arrangement system, an application implemented through JSP, Java, and MySQL, streamlines the task of organizing seat allocations for all students under examination supervision. This application captures comprehensive student details including name, roll number, section, branch, or year, and securely stores this information in databases. Administration duties such as managing these details are automated through the application. Technologies utilized: Java, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, MySQL, and Tomcat Server. Moving forward, let's discuss some of the advanced level Java projects. Speech recognition. The exponential rise in artificial intelligence and machine learning paved the way for speech recognition. It is widely used for many purposes like Alexa, Cortana, Google Translate, security, etc. In Java, the speech recognizer converts audio to text. Java.speech.recognition package defines the recognizer interface to support speech recognition, plus a set of supporting classes and interfaces. The project should be capable of certain tasks, including create a speech recognizer, allocate resources, load and enable grammar, attach result listener, commit changes, and process results. Tools you might prefer to work on the speech recognition project are Java and OpenCV. Next up we have face recognition. Face recognition is one of the most popular tools used in various domains like phones, law enforcement departments, etc. Working upon one such type of project will help you improve your skills by using multiple libraries, for example, OpenCV. Face recognition with OpenCV is an open source computer vision library with tons of modules like object detection, face recognition, and augmented reality. The project should be capable of certain tasks including managing users' faces, facilitate face identification, easy login and logout, store face IDs, identify suspect with just images, enhanced way to find cyber criminals. Tools you might prefer to work on facial recognition project are Java, OpenCV, Apache Ant, and MinGW60. Moving on to the last project of this video, we have a vehicle recognition system. Similar to face recognition, Java vehicle recognition also has a wide range of application in real time. The Java vehicle recognition application is used to identify vehicles by reading the license plate on it. A machine learning algorithm captures the image, reads the alphanumeric value on it, and fetches the vehicle's detail. Java ANPR is a number plate recognition software that implements algorithmic and mathematical principles from artificial intelligence, machine vision, and neural networks. The project should be capable of multiple tasks, including capture the image pre-processing, license character set segmentation, feature extraction, training neural network, evaluation, and result. Tools you might prefer to work on the vehicle recognition project are OpenCV, Java, and neural network.
If you want to become a successful software developer and gain handsome salary packages, then look at this wide range of software development courses by Simplilearn in collaboration with the top universities across the globe. So, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and enroll now. A year of experience is preferred to enroll in these courses, so check out the link mentioned in the description box below for more details.
Now, let's quickly begin with our session. First of all, we will discuss the right angle triangle pattern. So basically, the right angle triangle star pattern looks something like this as it is shown on my screen. So to resolve this problem statement and print the pattern, we must assume that this particular star arrangement is made in the form of a matrix, where the first row has single star and the second row has 2 stars, third row has 3 stars, and so on. Now to execute this particular code, we might need 2 for loops. So the first for loop will be for printing the rows and the second one will be for printing the columns. Now let us execute a practical program and see how does it work. Don't worry about the codes that we will be executing here, because I have formatted a draft about all the codes that I will be executing today, and that particular file will be attached in the description box below. On my screen you can see the particular pattern, which is a right angle triangle star pattern. So as discussed before, we will have the first outer for loop, which will be for printing the rows. So inside the outer for loop we have the second for loop, which we will be using for printing the columns. You can see I have defined the row value as 5, which means we will be printing the star pattern for 5 rows. And we have used a counter variable, which is I, which is assigned the value of 1, and the comparator operator is used here, which is I should be less than or equal to the number of rows declared, and followed by that we have a pre-increment operator, and once the condition is true, the control will be entered into the second for loop, where we have the next counter variable, which is j. So we have assigned j is equals to 1, and the comparator operator, which is j should be less than or equal to I, which is the value here, which is in the outer for loop, and followed by that we have the pre-increment operator. Once the condition is true, the control will enter into the inside for loop and will print a star. So here, just let us assume that the value of I is 1 and the statement is true. So the control will enter into the second for loop and it will see the conditional operator here. So j is less than or equal to I. So value of 1 is less than or equal to 1 and the star will be printed. After that we have the pre-increment operator. So here the j value will be incremented to 2. Now if we compare the values, 2 is not less than or not equal to 1. So the condition fails here. So it will not print a star again. It will come out of the inner for loop and it will see the next statement, which says it should print in the next line. Whereas in the inside for loop you can see we just used print, not print in the new line. So it will come to the new line and go back to the for loop again, and the increment of I will be taken place and the same runs again. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. So you can see that the program got successfully executed and the right angle triangle star pattern is print successfully. Now let us go into the next type of program. So the next type of program is the inverted right angle triangle star pattern. So similarly, according to the previous example, we also consider this one in the form of a matrix. So you can see that in the first row, we have 5 stars. In the second row, we have 4 stars. Similarly, so on. Now, let us try to check out the code and learn how does it work and how to print the star pattern on our screen. We are back in the practical mode again. So the kind of pattern that we wanted to print is this one, which is a little bit similar to the previous one, but only thing it is inverted. So the code is pretty much the same, but the only changes that we need to do are related to the comparator operator. In the previous example, we chose that I should be less than or equal to 1, and in the next stage we used pre-increment operator. In here we are using a different one, which is pre-decrement, and inside the for loop we have the j comparator operator in the same way. So here we have declared the row value as 5, and inside the for loop we will equate the counter variable equals to rows, which is 5, and followed by that the comparator operator compares if the value of 5 is greater than or equal to 1, and followed by that we will use the pre-decrement operator. Once the condition is true, the control will enter into the inside for loop, and here the counter variable j is assigned to the value 1, and the condition is j should be less than or equal to I, and followed by that we have the pre-increment operator, which is plus plus j. So once the condition is true, it will print the value of a star, and followed by that it will again continue the loop. So here the for loop will work in the following way. Int I is equals to 5, I is greater than or equal to 1, which is true, and pre-decrement. So the condition is true, so the control will enter into the inside for loop, where it will again compare with value of j. J is equals to 1 and j is less than or equal to 5, and followed by that we have the post increment. So the control will enter inside the for loop and print a star, and followed by that in the next instance the value of j will be incremented to 2. So 2 is less than or equal to I, followed by that pre-increment, and in the next iteration it will print a star again. So this will continue until the condition is true. Once the condition fails, the control will exit the for loop and print in the next line. You can see that we have print in the new line here, which is unlike the print function which is inside the for loop. So this will continue until the statements are true. Now let us try to execute this program and see if the desired pattern will be printing or not. There. You can see that the program got successfully executed and the pattern which we desired for is printed on the screen. Now let us move ahead into the next type of pattern. So the next type of pattern is the arrow-shaped pattern, and this almost looks familiar to the previous two programs. The only difference is we have combined them together to form an arrow pattern. Now let us try to combine the previous two programs and print this. So now you can see on my screen we have our desired pattern which looks like an arrow. So as discussed before, we are trying to combine the two programs that we executed before. So the first half of the program is designed for the first half of the pattern, which is completely similar to our first program. So the second half of the pattern is from our second program. But the only difference here is we have considered the value of rows is row minus 1 because we don't want another extra row to be printing here in this way. So you can see if we used I value is equals to rows, then the pattern would be something like this. We will not have a pointed edge. So to get a pointed edge, we will use row minus 1 to get this pattern what we desired for. Now let us try to execute this program and print the output. Now let us enter the number of rows we want. Let's enter 5. So there you go. Let me expand my output screen. Yeah, there you go. We have the pattern which we desired for. And don't forget that we need to use row -1 in the next stage, which is the second half of the program. So this is how the arrow pattern is printed. Now let us move further and see the next type of pattern in our list. So in the next pattern, we have the right angle triangle, which is completely similar to the first one, but the hypotenuse is on the other side. As you can see, this is the difference between the first program and this program. So in the first program, we had the hypotenuse in this direction, and now we have the hypotenuse in the opposite direction. Now, similarly to the first program, we shall consider this one as well in the form of a matrix. So you can see, if we consider this pattern in the form of a matrix, we have 4 spaces followed by a star. Similarly, in the second row, we have 3 spaces followed by 2 stars. In the third one, we have 2 spaces and 3 stars, and so on. So the main point that we need to consider here is, first we need to print the spaces. Followed by that, we need to print the stars to get this pattern. Now let us execute a practical program and see the output. So back in the practical mode, you can see on my screen, the desired pattern what we are looking for is this. So here, the only difference is we have to print the spaces first. So for printing the spaces, we will be using this for loop with the condition j is equals to 2 into n minus I, and j should be greater than or equals to 0, and j decrement, which is a post decrement operator. So what is the value of n? N is nothing but the value of rows. So the value of n is declared in the main function, and n is equals to 5. After that, we will be calling the print stars function, which is over here, and the value of n will be carried over here, and then the counter variables I and j will take care of the for loops. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. So you can see that the program is successfully executed and the desired pattern is printed successfully. So this for loop will be run until the condition is true. Once this for loop fails, we will enter into the next for loop, which is particularly designed to print the stars. Now after this, let us move ahead into our next type of pattern. So the next type of pattern is an inverted right angle triangle pattern, which is opposite to the second type of program that we dealt with. Now similarly, let us consider this in the same way as we considered all the other programs, that is, in the form of a matrix. So here we have 5 stars in the first row, 4 stars in the next one, and 1 space. Followed by that we have 2 spaces, followed by that we have the 3 stars, and 3 spaces, 2 stars, and so on. Now let us see a practical program and try to print this particular pattern. So we are back in the practical mode, so you can see that the desired star pattern is this, and it is completely similar to our previous pattern. So the only difference is we tried to print spaces first in the earlier pattern, and here we are trying to print the stars first. So that's the only difference. And we have the same for loops. So the first for loop is for rows and it will print spaces, and the second for loop is for stars, which will print the stars. As you can see, we have the row values and the column values here as the comparator operator, and we have the comparator operator which finds if j is greater than I. In the first case, the loop will fail because the value of j and I are completely similar, because we have declared I is equals to rows in the first outer for loop and same j is equals to rows in the second inner for loop. So obviously the condition has to fail and it will not print any space here. It will directly enter into the next for loop and will print the star pattern, and followed by that we will enter into the next line. So this for loop will print the number of stars in the first row according to the row number. For example, if we give 5 as the row number, then it will print 5 stars in the first row, and it will exit the for loop and it will enter into the next line, and the same pattern will be continued. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. Now let us give 5 as the number of rows needed. So there you go, you can see the star pattern here. So this is how this particular star pattern will be generated. Now let us move further and check out the next type of pattern program in our list. So the next type of pattern program in our list is arrow. So this arrow is completely similar to the previous one. The only difference is it is in the inverted way, which is it is pointed towards the left side. Now let us check out the practical program and learn how to execute this. Back onto Eclipse IDE. So you can find some similarities between the previous two programs and this particular program. In the previous two programs, we tried to print the first half of the pattern, and followed by that, we have printed the second half of the pattern. Now we are going to just combine both the programs and print this particular arrow pattern. So here, the first half of this particular program is concerned with the top portion of this pattern, which is the right angle triangle. Followed by that, the second half of the program, where we have the conditions placed. So this particular segment of the code takes care about the second half of the program, which is the inverted right angle triangle. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. So let us specify the number of rows as 5, completely similar to the previous two programs. Now let's press enter. Now there you go. Let me expand my console. So there you go. You can see the arrow pattern. So this is how you print an arrow pattern pointing towards the left side. We have also discussed an arrow pattern where the arrow will be pointing towards the right side as the program number 3. Again, don't worry about the codes. All the programs that I'm going to execute in this session are drafted in the form of a text document, and that is linked in the description box below. You can take that source file and practice the programs for yourself. Don't worry. Now let's move ahead and check out the next type of program. So the next type of pattern that we have in our list is the pyramid. We also call this an acute angled triangle star pattern. Now let us understand the logic for this. Now you can see without the matrix format, this looks completely similar to our first program, but only the difference is we have a space, which is obvious, but there is a small difference. Let us check out what the difference is. If we look this program in the form of a matrix, you can see there are variations in spaces. In the first row, we have 2 spaces, 1 star, followed by that again 2 spaces. In the next row, we have alternate space and star, space and star, and similarly in the third row we have a star, space, star and space. So this is how the matrix continues according to the number of rows provided. So let us understand how the logic exactly works for this program. Okay, so you can see the pattern that we desired is in the form of an acute angle triangle or pyramid. Now we have 2 counter variables, which is I is equals to 0 in the outer for loop and j is equals to n-1, which is inside the for loop. So the value of n is equals to 5, which is the total number of rows that we needed in our particular pattern. Now you can see in the outer for loop we have the condition, which is I should be less than n. So I should be less than the number of rows, which is equals to 5. Followed by that we have the post increment operator I++. So the condition will be true because 0 is less than 5 and it will enter into the inside for loop where we have j, which is equals to 5 minus 0. Followed by that we have the condition. So 5 is greater than 1. So the resultant of this particular statement is 5. So 5, which is now the value of j, is greater than 1. Followed by that we have the post decrement operator, which will decrease the value of j in every iteration. So once the statement is true, it will try to print a space. So it will print the spaces until the condition is true. So once the first for loop fails, the control will enter into the next following for loop where we have j is equals to 0 and j should be less than or equal to the value of I, which is currently equals to 0. And followed by the conditional statement, we have the post increment operator, which is j++. So this particular for loop is used for printing two things, which is the first one, star, followed by that we have a space. So once this for loop gets executed, the control will exit it and will print in the new line. So this is how the program works. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. There you go. The program got successfully executed and the required spaces and the stars have been printed here. So as you can see, we have spaces, followed by that we have a star. Similarly, space, spaces onto the left, a star and the second star. So followed by the previous program, we have the next program, which is also considered to be like a pyramid, but the only difference is it is in an inverted format. Now let us check out the logic behind this program and try to execute a practical program. So logic wise, it's completely similar to the previous one. We have star, followed by that we have a space, and again a star, space and a star. Next row we have alternate space and star, and finally we have two spaces, star and two spaces. So the number of spaces and stars is based upon the number of rows we provide. Now let us try to execute a program and see the output. Don't worry, this is completely similar to the previous one, but the only difference is it is printed in the inverted fashion. So there will be minor changes to the code. Let's try to look on those changes. So here we are back in Eclipse. So the desired pattern is here, which is an inverted pyramid, and the previous program was a regular pyramid. So here is the logic, and we have the following for loops. So the first for loop is dedicated for printing the number of spaces we require. So inside the exterior for loop, we have the counter variable I is equals to 0, and I should be less than or equals to the number of rows minus 1, and followed by that we have the post increment operator I++. So let us assume that we have provided the number of rows to be 5, and according to the logic, I is equals to 0, and followed by that 0 is less than or equals to 5 minus 1, which is 4, and followed by that we have the post increment operator, which will increment the value of I to 1 once after the for loop first iteration is finished. So once the exterior for loop condition is true, the control will enter into the second for loop, which is the internal for loop, and we have the second counter variable, which is j is equals to 0, followed by that the comparator operator, which says j should be either less than or equal to the value of I. Followed by that we have the post increment operator on j. So this particular code segment, or the first part of the program, takes care about the number of spaces we require in our pattern. Followed by that we have the second for loop, which will take care of the number of stars we print and the number of spaces we require after the star pattern. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. Now let us provide the number of rows we need. Let's provide the value as 5. Now there you go. According to the logic provided in the program, the star patterns are successfully generated, followed by the spaces. Now moving ahead, we have the next type of pattern, which is the combination of first and second pyramids. Now let us understand the logic and print this pattern. Now you can see the desired pattern is the combination of the first pyramid and the second pyramid. So the first half of the program is derived from the first pyramid pattern, and the second part of the program is derived from the second pyramid pattern. Now we have combined them together, and now we are trying to print the rhombus pattern. Now let's try to execute this program and see the output. Let us provide the number of rows as 5, and there you go. So here you can see the desired star pattern has been successfully executed. So according to the input, we have the first 5 rows, and followed by that we have the inverted star pattern, where we avoided the first row and printed the following 4 rows, so that we have a proper Rubik's pattern. Now moving ahead, we shall see the next type of pattern in our list. So followed by the previous pattern, we have the next type of pattern, which looks completely similar to the previous one. but the only difference is we have printed the second type of pyramid first and then the first type of pyramid, which makes it look like an hourglass. Now let us understand the logic and print this pattern. So here is the desired pattern what we are looking for, and this was the previous pattern what we printed. Now followed by the first segment, we have the second segment which is dedicated to print the second half of the pattern, which happens to be the first type of pyramid, which is a regular pyramid. But the only difference is inside the first for loop we are using the rows -1 command because we don't want an extra star. So if we add in an extra star, this pattern will look a little abnormal. So let us try. So this is what it looks like if we had an extra star there. So let us remove it. So this is how our pattern should look like. So that's the reason why we are using row -1 here. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. Now let us enter the number of rows we want. Let us input 5. Enter. So there you go. You can see the program got successfully executed and the desired star pattern has been printed on the console. Now let us move further and have a look on the next type of pattern in our list. So followed by the hourglass pattern, we have the next pattern where we need to print a diagonal star pattern. Now if we look at the logic, it's just a single line which is placed in the form of a diagonal. Now let us check the logic behind it. So you can see we have printed stars in the form of a diagonal of a matrix. Now we have the first 4 spaces, followed by that we have a star, and similarly 3 spaces provided by a star, then a space, and so on. Now to print this pattern, what's the logic? Let's go back to Eclipse and try to print this program. So this is our desired pattern. Now let us go into our program. Now inside the program we have 2 counter variables, which are one I, 2 is j. So the first for loop is I is equals to 1, I is less than or is equals to 5, which is the row number, then I post increment. So when the logic is true, which is 1 is less than or equal to the row number 5, the control will enter into the second for loop. So once the control enters into the outer for loop, we have the second for loop where we have our second counter variable, which is j. J is equals to 0 and j is less than 5 minus I, which is 5 minus 1, which is the current value of I, which is 4. So 0 is the value of j currently. So 0 is less than 4. Followed by that we have the post increment on j counter variable. So once the condition is true, the control will enter into the second inner for loop and will print space. So this loop will run until the condition is true. Once the condition fails, it will come out of the inner for loop and will print a star in the new line. Followed by that, it will continue to start the outer for loop again. So this is how the flow goes ahead. Now let's run the program and see the output. So you can see the program got successfully executed and the desired pattern is printed. Now let's move ahead and understand the next type of pattern in our program. So the next type of pattern is a little bit similar to the previous one. So in the previous pattern we had one diagonal. Right now we have 2 diagonals which have formed the shape of X. So we can consider this as an X pattern. Now let us check out the logic, and next after that let's execute the program. So according to the logic, when we consider this particular pattern in a form of a matrix, we have the stars printed in the first row, followed by that we have 3 spaces and then again a star. So this is continued in the same way with alternate spaces, and in the third row we have a single intersection point with 1 star. So this is how the pattern should look like once the program gets executed. Now let us check out the program and see the output. So you can see on my output console, this was our previous pattern. Now what we are going to do is make a similar pattern in the opposite direction and make sure they intersect each other. Now you can see our program has 2 segments, the first segment and the second segment. They both look a little similar because the first segment will print the upper part of the pattern, that is the first V, and then the second segment will print the lower part of the pattern, which is the inverted V. Now let us check out the condition. We have the first outer loop which has the first counter variable, which is I is equals to n. N is nothing but the number of rows that we want in our pattern. Then I should be greater than or equal to 1. Followed by that we have the post decrement operator where we will decrease the value of I. Then if the condition is true, then the control will enter into the next statement where we have the inner for loop with second counter variable, that is j is equals to I. Then the condition is j should be less than the value of rows provided. Then post increment of j, and if the condition statement is true, then it will enter into the inner for loop and it will print a space. Similarly, for printing the star, we have the next segment. Inside the next segment, the condition is a little trickier because we don't want to print any stars in the space between the X pattern. We provide this condition where j is equals to 1 and j should be less than or equals to 2 times the value of I, which is the outer for loop, minus 1. If this condition is true, the control will enter inside the for loop where we have if else condition. If j is equals to 1 or j is equals to 2 into I minus 1, then we should print a star, else we should print a space. So this will print the upper part of the pattern, and similarly we have another segment which will print the lower part of the pattern, which is the inverted V pattern. Now let's execute this program and see the output. As you can see, the program got executed. Now let us provide the value of n. Let us provide 5, and there you go. You can see that the program printed the desired pattern. So this is the first half of the pattern, which is the proper V. Then this is the second half of the program, which is the inverted V. So this is what the flow of the program is. Now let us move further and check out the next pattern in our list. So the next pattern in our list is the inverted V pattern. Now let us check out the logic behind it. If you see this in the form of a matrix, then you can recognize this. We had already discussed similar program, which was the third one, where we had printed the pyramid shape. But the only difference is we have missed out the star in between, which makes it look like a inverted V. Now let us go back to Eclipse and execute a program based on this to print this pattern. As you can see, we have our desired pattern on my screen, which is an inverted V. So if we check out the logic, we have outside loop and inside loop. So we have two for loops. So the first outer for loop has out is equals to 1. Out should be less than or equals to the number of row size, then post increment of outside variable. If the condition is true, we enter into the inner for loop where we have inner loop is equals to 1. Inner loop should be less than or equals to the row size into 2. Then we have increment operator, which is a post increment. So if this particular condition is true, then we enter into another statement where we have the if else statement. So if in value is equals to control X or in is equals to print control Y, then we should print star, else we should print a space. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. Now let us provide the row size, which is 5. So as you can see, we have got our desired pattern. Now let us move ahead and execute the next type of pattern, which is the V pattern. Now let us understand the logic behind it. It is completely similar to the previous program, but the difference is the pattern is in inverted position to the previous one, which is in the proper V format. So now let us try to check out the code and execute the program and print the pattern. So on my screen, you can see the desired pattern what we are looking for, which is V. Now the previous program was to print an inverted V. So the complete program is same, but only there is a minor change in the logic where we have replaced I as greater than or equals to 0. And there is some change in the second segment as well. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. So you can see the program got successfully executed and the desired pattern is printed here. The value of n or row size is equals to 5, which we have declared here in the main part. Now let us get back and check out the next pattern to be executed in our list. So the next pattern is the combination of both an inverted V and a normal V, which will result in the form of a rhombus. Now as you can see, this is our previous program. Now we have two segments in our code, where we have the first segment to print the starting or the top position, which is an inverted V format, and the second segment of the code is designed to print the second half of the pattern, which is the normal V pattern. So we will combine these two and print the rhombus shape. Now let me provide the number of rows, which is 5. So there you go. You can see the desired pattern. Now let us move ahead and check out our next pattern. So the next pattern is completely similar to one of the previous ones, which is a pyramid pattern. But the difference is this pyramid is hollow, or in other words, this looks like an acute angled triangle. Now let us understand the logic behind it. So if you look at this matrix, then you can find that we are going to print the stars in the form of a side of the triangle, which is we will print the stars in the shape of a triangle and nothing inside the matrix. Now let us understand the program and print this pattern. So as you can see, the desired pattern is being located here, which is a triangular pattern. Now inside this, we have three particular for loops. So the first for loop is the outer for loop, and the rest two for loops are the internal for loops. So the first internal for loop is dedicated to print spaces where we don't require stars. And the second internal for loop is dedicated to print stars where we require them. Also we have an if-else condition which decides where to print a star and where not to. Now if we look at the condition, I should be less than or equal to the number of rows provided, and if the condition is true, then we enter into the internal for loop. And in the internal for loop, if j is less than the number of rows given, then in that particular location we need to print a space. Once the condition in the first for loop is failed, the control will enter into the next for loop where we have the next counter variable, that is k is equals to 1, and k should be less than or equals to 2 into I minus 1, where the value of I is 1 at the current stage, and followed by that we have the post increment of the value of k. If k is equal to 1, or I is equal to the number of rows, or k is equal to 2 star I minus 1, then we should print a star. So this will give the location in the matrix where we should print star to make it as a triangle pattern. If location is anything else than the condition provided, then we should be printing space there. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. Let us provide the number of rows as 5. So there you go, we have printed the desired pattern. So the next pattern after the triangle pattern is the box pattern. So this particular program will be completely similar to the previous program. The only difference is we need to find the locations where we need to print stars so that the resultant pattern looks like a box. So for that we will make some changes in our program, and those changes will be related to the rows and columns. Now let us understand the logic. So as discussed before, we need to look at this pattern in the form of a matrix and check out the number of rows and columns. So where the number of row and column are equal, we need to print a star. So let us now check out the program and execute the program to print this particular pattern. So as you can see on my screen, we have the same program that we used to print the triangle, but now here we have rows and columns. So n is nothing but the row and m is nothing but the column. So if the value of the external for loop, that is I is equals to 1 and I is equals to the number of rows provided, similarly j is equals to 1, which is the internal for loop counter variable value, and if j is equals to m, that is the column value, then we should print a star in that particular location, and wherever the location does not match, we should provide a space. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. So there you go, we have our desired pattern, which is the box pattern. Now let us move ahead and check out the next type of pattern in our list. So you can see The next pattern is completely similar to our first pattern. The first pattern was our right-angled triangle. Now we have the same right-angled triangle, but the only difference is we have used numbers here. Now we will use the numbers from our for loops and we will print the same values in our pattern so that it looks like a right-angled triangle. Now let us understand the logic. So we will see this pattern in the form of a matrix. Now we will print the numbers where we require them. Where we don't require the numbers, we will print spaces. Now let us check out the program and execute it to print the following pattern. Now you can see we have got back to our same program, but the only difference is here we are using the values of the inner for loop, which is j, instead of a star. Previously we used star symbol here and we are now replacing it with the inner for loop value. Let us try to execute this program and see the output. Now let us enter the number of rows as 5 and there you go. We have the values of the internal for loop, making the pattern look like a right angle triangle pattern. Now let us move further and check out on our next type of pattern in the list. So here is another right angled triangle in our list, but the difference is we are using the numbers in a continuous manner, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 15. This type of triangle is also called as Floyd's triangle. Now let us understand the logic. So similar to the previous one, we will consider this in the form of a matrix and we will print the numbers only where we require them, that is to form a right angle triangle. Where we don't need the numbers, we will try to print a space there. Now let us check out the program and execute it and print this pattern. Now you can see we have got back to Eclipse. And don't get scared about the pattern, it's completely similar to the previous one. Only thing is we will be using one extra counter variable, which is k. So we have provided the value of k is equals to 1, and where we are supposed to print stars, we will add the post increment operator to the counter variable k. So whenever the for loop gets executed, we will be printing the values of k, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. So there you go, the values of k, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 until 15. So this is how the Floyd's triangle works. Now let's get back and check out the next pattern in our list. So the next pattern in our list is similar to the previous one, which is pyramid. So this type of pyramid is also called as Pascal's triangle. Now let us check out the logic. The logic is completely similar to the pyramid's logic, but instead of star, we are going to use numbers. So this type of triangle is called as Pascal's triangle, and the logic is also a little bit different from the regular pyramid. Let us understand the logic through the code. So now you can see the program on my screen. So the logic and the for loops used are completely similar to that of the pyramid, but only the difference is we are going to print the value of number. So the number is firstly initialized as 1, followed by that we have a formula for that, which is number is equals to number into I minus j divided by j plus 1, which are the values of the counter variables of outer for loop and inner for loop respectively. Now let's try to execute this program and see the pattern. So you can see the program got successfully executed and the Floyd's triangle has been successfully constructed here. Now let us move ahead and check out the next pattern in our list. So the next pattern in our list is a box which is made up of binary numbers. Now let us understand the logic for it first. So if we look at this in the form of a matrix, we have binary numbers 1 and 0, which forms the pattern of a box. Now let us check out the program and execute the program to print this particular pattern. So you can see on my screen we have the program to print that particular box type of pattern using the binary numbers. So we have the external for loop for rows and the counter variable I is equals to 1 and I should be less than or equal to the number of rows provided. Once the condition is true, we enter into the external for loop where we have the number and where we have the condition I modulus 2 is equals to 0 and the number is equals to 0. And inside that we have our logic to print the binary numbers. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. Now let me place the number of rows as 5 and there you go. We have our box pattern using binary numbers. Now let us get back and check the next pattern in our list. So the next pattern is the Ruby pattern. This is completely similar to our program where we printed the Ruby pattern using the stars. Now we'll use the numbers and print that particular pattern. Now the logic for this is completely same that of the Ruby pattern we used, but the only difference is instead of a star, we'll be placing the value of the counter variables. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. So there you go, the program got successfully executed, and instead of stars, we have printed the Ruby pattern using the numbers. Now moving ahead, we have our next pattern. So here, the next pattern is completely similar to the first one, which is the right angled triangle pattern, but here, instead of numbers or stars, we will be using alphabets. So for alphabets, we will be using the ASCII values in the program. Let us check out that program soon. Now, first let's understand the logic. The logic is also completely similar to the right angle triangle, which we followed for stars and numbers. Now, let's check out the program. So as you can see, the desired pattern is the right angle triangle made out of alphabets. So the logic is completely true, but the only difference is we are going to print characters using ASCII values and alphabet function. Now let us try to execute this program and see the output. So the desired pattern is the right angle triangle printed using the alphabets. Now the logic is completely similar to the right angle triangle pattern, but the only difference is we are going to use the ASCII values. So we have declared an integer type variable alphabet with the ASCII value 65, which should start the alphabets from capital A, because the ASCII value of capital A is 65. Now let us run the program and see the output. So there you go, the program got successfully executed and we have the right angle triangle printed using the capital alphabets. Now let's get back and check out our next pattern. So our next pattern is a pyramid again. So instead of numbers and stars, we are going to use the alphabetical values. Now let's check out the logic. Even here you can see the logic is similar to the pyramid logic. Now let's check out the code and execute the code and see the pattern. Now you can even see the logic is also similar to the pyramid logic, but here the only difference is we are going to use the ASCII value, that is 65, which is equivalent to capital A. Now in the print statement, instead of a star, we are going to print the alphabets, and this particular for loop is for spaces. Now let's quickly execute this program and see the output. So there you go. The pyramid pattern has been successfully printed.
If you want to become a successful software developer and gain handsome salary packages, then look at this wide range of software development courses by Simplilearn in collaboration with the top universities across the globe. So, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and enroll now. A year of experience is preferred to enroll in these courses. So check out the link mentioned in the description box below for more details.
So in this session, we are going to focus on a particular project. And the project we are going to focus is about an ATM application. So you might have interacted with different ATM stores in your cities where you go in, you insert your card, you enter your PIN, and then you can view the balance, you can withdraw some amount, you can also deposit some amount from the ATM. So we will try to look at it from that perspective, and we will see what kind of different Java and OOPS concepts we can use to build such ATM application. This is not a super versatile application, but this is just to give you the idea of how to use those OOPS concepts to build a simple or a complex Java application. So let's start from the options menu class, because that will give us the understanding of what kind of functionality I'm using. And here you will use that I'm using different concepts which I have taught you so far in this particular series. So for example, we are using the IO exception, we are using the hash map class, we are also using a scanner class, which is used to take input from the command line. So this option menu class is extending the account class, and I will come to the account class in a while, but let's see what this option menu class is doing. This particular class has it is using a decimal format money format class, which is to denote what kind of format of money you have. Then we have a hash map, which is storing the couple of records of account number to PIN mapping. So we create a map, and inside the get login method, we add a couple of entries to the map. Here, the first entry, the first integer is pointing to the customer number, and the second integer is pointing to the PIN of the account of this particular customer number. So if we call the get login method, this method will insert the data. After that, it will ask the customer to enter the customer number, which has to be one of these two. If you provide any other value, then there should be a logic in the application to reject the input. So whatever customer number the customer inputs, we pass that inside this particular method called set customer number. Again, I will come back to that. And once we have provided a valid customer number, then this method is going to ask you to enter a PIN number. And remember, I told you this is the customer number to the PIN number mapping. So whatever customer number you select from here, you will be providing the corresponding PIN number. And again, if you provide an invalid PIN number, you will get an error. So that will all happen inside this try block. And if you enter any invalid characters in the PIN number or the ATM customer number, then you will get an exception, which I am writing inside the catch block. This is all what we have seen so far. After the successful enter of the customer number and the PIN number, I fetch those values from these two methods. Again, I will talk about what these methods are doing. And again, I'm doing some basic validation checks, but things get interesting in this method. So what we covered so far was the get login method. Let me close this method here. So we covered the get login method. The second method, which is defined in this particular class, is the account type. So here we will ask once the customer has provided the customer number and the PIN number, we will ask the customer to provide the account type. This application supports two different account types, which are checking account or a savings account. So the customer has to choose one of them. Again, we will be taking the input from the command line using the scanner class. And then I'm using a switch case. If the customer entered 1, then I will execute some code for the checking account, which is defined here in the case 1. And if the customer entered 2, then the case 2 will be executed. And if it enters 3, then I will exit the application by just printing a sys out. So here I'm using the switch case construct to provide different options to the customer. There's also a default case specified here, which says invalid choice. So this is what is happening in the get account type method. The next method is if the customer has used the option 1, then we call the get checking method. So let's go to the get checking method, which is the next method which is defined in this particular class. So if the customer has selected a checking account, then we provide the following functionality to the customer, which is the customer can view the balance, customer can withdraw the funds, customer can deposit the funds to the checking account, or they can just exit the application. And again, I'm using a switch case here. Based on the customer types 1, 2, 3, or 4, the corresponding case block will be executed. For example, if the customer wants to view the balance, then this block will get executed, and I call the get account type method. If the customer selects the 2 as the withdraw fund, then get checkings with withdraw input method gets called, and then get account type gets called. Similarly, if the customer enters 3, then we deposit the fund. And for that also, I have defined a method. I will go to the definition of these methods as we go along, but right now we are just building the framework. So the get checking deposit input method will be called whenever the customer selects the option 3. And for option 4, we just exit the application. So this is what is happening in the get checking method. Now, if from the account selection, if the customer selected second option, which was savings account, then we were calling get saving method. So this is where the get saving method is defined. And again, it is following the exact same format as we saw in the get checking method, where we present the following options like viewing balance, withdrawing the funds, and depositing the funds in the savings account. And I have some methods defined here. For example, get saving withdraw input, get saving deposit input. So we define the switch case here based on the customer's choices here. And that is what is happening in the get saving method. So let me close this method as well. And that's all what is defined inside the option menu class. So we ask the customer to enter the customer number, the PIN number from this get login method. Then based on that, we provide the customer the options to choose the account type, whether they can choose the savings account or the checking account. And based on that, whatever account type they use, we call the get checking or get saving method. And inside this method, we provide the customer the other options to either withdraw the money, deposit the money, or view the balance. That is what is happening inside this option menu class. Now let's go to the account class, and all the methods which we saw here will be provided a definition in the account class. You also see this option menu is extending the accounts class, so an inheritance concept is being used here. Let's go to the account class now. So this is the account class where I have defined some private member variables like customer number. So now you will be familiar with the customer number, PIN number, which I just described, and also with the checking balance and the savings balance. You can also divide this account class into two child classes where you have a savings account class and a checking account class. But for simplicity, I've kept it to one class. I'm initializing a scanner input which will be used at multiple places. And then I have the setters and getters for these four member variables. So you see set customer number, get customer number. If you remember, this set customer number was called in the option menu class. If I go back to the get login, once we ask the customer to enter the customer number, we call the set customer number, which gets called here. Similarly, we call the set PIN number, which gets called here. Similarly, once we have said that, we were fetching the values using the get customer number and the get PIN number. And that is also defined here in terms of the getters, get PIN number and get customer number. Similarly, we also have the getters for the checking balance and the saving balance member variables. We do not have the setters for them because they are not technically setters, but we have to calculate the balance. It's not a simple setter where you can just return the value. So now let's look at some of the business functions of the account class. How do you deposit? How do you view the balance? How do you withdraw the balance, etc. So you see these two methods, which are specifically when the customer is trying to withdraw the money from their account. And these methods are basically called internally by other methods. So we will come to that. Let's just understand that we have two methods for calculating the withdrawable amount or executing the withdraw transaction for the checking account and the savings account. Similarly, I have two more methods here, which are calculating the depositing for the checking account and calculating the depositing for the savings account. And then we get the bigger methods, which are using these calculation methods. So I defined four calculation methods so far: calc checking withdraw, calc saving withdraw, calc checking deposit, and calc saving deposit, basically withdrawing and deposit for both of the classes. And then we have these business functions called get checking withdraw input and get saving withdraw input, get checking deposit input, and get saving deposit input. So these getter methods are something which were being called from the option menu class, if you remember. If you go back to the option menu class, and if you chose the checking account, you get these options. And let's say you chose option 2, which was withdraw funds, or option 3, which was deposit funds. Then the corresponding methods which were being called were get checking withdraw input and get checking deposit input. And this is the exact same method, get checking withdraw input and get checking deposit input. So if you see what is happening inside this particular method is a couple of sysouts. Then we take the scanner input amount and we convert that amount to the double. After that, we check if the amount which the customer wants to withdraw is smaller than the checking balance or not. And I'm running this condition to check that. If the amount is smaller than the checking balance, then we call the calc checking withdraw method, which was defined right here. Remember, I told you that these four calc methods will be used, and this is how they are used. So here I'm actually subtracting the value. So whatever amount the customer wants to withdraw, subtract that from the main balance and then return the new main balance. That's what you do, right? If you have 1,000 rupees and if you want to withdraw 500, you subtract 500 from 1,000 and then you send back the remaining balance. So that is what is happening when we call this method, and then we print the new checking account balance. That is what is happening in the get checking withdraw input method. Similarly, if you chose option 3, which was depositing funds to the checking account, then get checking deposit input gets called, and it is defined right here, get checking deposit input. And here, instead of subtraction, we are doing the addition. So here I'm again doing a condition check that the current balance plus the new amount which has been supplied by the customer from the command line, the total sum of it should be greater than 0. What if the customer entered an amount minus 5,000? I should not allow that. So that's the reason I'm putting this condition in place. And if the current balance plus the new amount which is supposed to be deposited to the account, the sum of it is greater than 0, then call the calc checking deposit method. And this is where the calc checking deposit method is present, and where I'm just doing present balance plus the new amount and returning the new balance. That's all which is being done here. And you will see exactly similar logic running for the savings account as well. If you look at the get saving withdraw input, which is used to withdraw money from the savings account. So I take the input from the command line and I run a condition check that the amount which the customer wants to withdraw should be less than the current saving account's balance. If yes, then call calc saving withdraw method, which is defined here, where I subtract the amount from the current balance and I return the new balance. And similarly, you will see the exact same functionality in the get saving deposit, where we add the money instead of subtracting the money. And this is all what is defined in the account class. So we talked about the option menu class, we talked about the account class, and now we have the ATM class, which is the entry point, which basically initializes the option menu class and calls the get login method. Remember, get login was the first method which asked you to provide the customer number, and then get login called the method to choose the account type, and the account type methods then called the method to choose the option to withdraw, deposit, or exit. So now we have built a fair understanding of what is happening in this application. So let's run this application. So I just ran this application, and let me bring the console here. It's first asking for a customer number. So I will go to the option menu class and I will pick up one of the customer number which I have hard coded here. So I will provide that customer number and hit enter. Then it asks me for the PIN number. So remember, you have to provide the correct PIN number corresponding to the customer number. So I'm taking this PIN number, just copying it and pasting it here. Then this whole code got executed, and then it called the get account type, and the get account type method provided you with these options, which you see here on the screen. So based on what you select, the case block will get executed. And let's say I want to go for a checking account. So I press 1 and I hit enter. Once you select the checking account, the case 1 gets selected and it calls the get checking method. And the get checking method again provides you with another menu, view, withdraw, or deposit, or exit. So let's say I want to deposit funds. So I press 3 and hit enter. It says the current balance is 0 and enter the amount you want to deposit. Let's say I want to deposit 500 and I hit enter. You get the message saying the new checking account balance is 500 and you have successfully deposited the money. And that is what I did for the checking account. Now let's try to withdraw something from the checking account. So you again get back the same option, because inside the get checking method, we call once we have successfully done the business operation, we again call the account type method to display the menu again to the user. So let's say again select the checking account class, and this time I want to withdraw the funds. Remember, I've added 500 there. So let's say I want to withdraw, so I choose the option 2 as the choice. Current balance is 500 and it's asking me the amount you want to withdraw from the checking account. So I enter, let's say 100, and I hit enter. When I do that, the new checking account balance becomes 400. So the 100 got subtracted from the 500 and the new balance is shown to your screen. You can do exactly the same thing for the savings account as well. And let's also run a negative condition. So I again select the checking account and I want to withdraw the funds. I choose the option 2. Current balance is 400 and I would like to withdraw 1000. What happens? If you do that, we get a message saying balance cannot be negative. And this is coming from the calc checking method, which is defined here. So what is happening that I wanted to withdraw the funds from the checking account, and here get checking withdraw input got called. Here, this condition was checked. So the checking balance was 400 and the amount I wanted to withdraw was 1000. So 400 minus 1000 is not greater than equal to 0. So it jumped into the else block and it said balance cannot be negative. So this is how you can also build some error conditions in your code which are mandatory and which should be built. Otherwise, your application will have a lot of bugs. We can also exit the application. So if you just type 3 and hit enter, you will exit from the application and it will again call the login method where it will again ask you to enter the customer number. So this is how you can run this application, and this was a simple use case for you to show how you can use the different object-oriented concepts like classes, objects, methods, setters, getters, switch case, etc. to build the application with the correct business logic. And this is all I want to cover in this particular session. And in the next session, we are going to have a look at another interesting core Java project just to build our understanding more better about the core Java concept. Let's get started with walking through a core Java project using all the different OOPS concept we have learned so far. So in this example, we are going to have a look at a calculator application, and this calculator application supports primarily 4 different operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So let's see how do we build that app. So in front of me right now is open the main class. So I have a main app class here, which has a public static void main method. And the first thing we see is a read input class, which is calling a read method. So if you go to the read input class, it has a simple static method here, which is the read method, and it is using the scanner class. If you remember, I talked about the scanner class, which is used to take inputs from the command line from the user. So we initialize the scanner class and we start taking the inputs, and whatever the user inputs in terms of the expression, let's say the user entered 4 plus 5 or whatever, that whole expression gets sent back into this input line as a string. And that comes back here in the input expression. Once we have captured the input expression, the next thing we do is divide the input expression in the numbers and the operators. Basically, an expression would be either something like 4 plus 5 into 3 divided by 2, let's say. Let's say the user entered this expression. So this has either numbers or operators. So that's what we are doing here. We are using the split method of the string API, the string class basically. And this split method is going to split the numbers and operators into 2 different string arrays. And here I'm providing the split expression that split at every time you encounter one of these symbols. So this, when you execute this particular statement, it is going to return a numbers array, which will be created based on this expression. So you will get an array with 4, 5, 3, and 2. And similarly, in the operator array, you are going to split or pick out the elements every time you receive a number. So this operator array is going to hold this plus sign, this multiply sign, and this divide sign. Hope you get the understanding that we are just splitting the whole expression into 2 different arrays, where first array is holding only the numbers and no mathematical expressions, and second array is just holding the mathematical operators and no numbers. And we'll see why we need to do that in the upcoming lines. Once I've created this string array, I just want to store or convert these string arrays into a queue. So I convert this array into a list by calling the array.asList. So this expression is going to return a list. And then I'm going to convert this normal list into a linked list, and then going to store this linked list into the queue of numbers. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the operator array as well, converting this into a generic list, converting that generic list into a linked list, and then storing this linked list as a queue. So I have an operators queue and I have a numbers queue. Both of them have been stored into a queue now. And then I'm using the poll method. If you remember, the poll method of the queue is used when you want to fetch the first front element, the head element of the queue. So whichever element is sitting at the head of the queue will be taken out the moment you call the poll method. So I fetch the first number from the numbers queue. So in this case, 4 will be fetched here in this variable. And after that, I run a loop on the numbers queue. And I'm going to run this particular loop till this particular queue is not empty. If you see, there's a negation here. So I'm going to pick up numbers one by one from this numbers queue till the number queue becomes empty. And inside the loop, I do the exact same poll operation for the operations queue. So this operations queue is holding all these mathematical operations like plus, star, and divide. So I'm going to pick the head of it. So in this case, plus will be picked up and will be stored in this variable called OPR. And then I'm going to run a switch case on this OPR. Basically, as I told you, in this particular calculator application, we are supporting 4 operations, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So I define a case for each of the mathematical expression. So you see there are 4 different cases here. And for each case, I'm initializing a class. If it's a plus sign, then I'm initializing the add class. If it's a minus sign, then I'm initializing the subtract class. For multiplication, I have a class called multiply. And for division, I have a class called divide. Let's have a look at what these classes are containing. So if I go to the add class, first of all, it is implementing an interface called operate. And this operate interface has just a single method called getResults, which is accepting a variable argument array. If you remember, I told you that you can also use a var_arg array. This is called a var_arg expression. This means that this numbers will be an array of arbitrary length. It can be a 1-element array, it can be a 2-element array, it can be a 4-element array, or whatever you supply. But it is still going to be a fixed length array, but the length is going to be dependent upon how much argument you supply to this particular method. So that is what this interface operate is doing. It just has one method declared, which is called getResult, which is accepting an array of numbers. So if the add class is implementing the operate interface, then it has to override the getResult method. And here it is just doing a summation of all the numbers which have been supplied. So if you supply 4 numbers, it is just going to add up those 4 numbers and return the sum. And the exact same kind of logic or similar logic will be seen in other operate classes. So if I go to the subtract class, it runs the exact same operation, but it subtracts the values. If I go to the multiply class, it is also implementing the operate interface. And in the get result, it is just multiplying all the values. Similarly, in the divide class, it is also implementing the operate interface and it is dividing all the numbers one by one. So it's doing pretty much the same thing in terms of the expression and the logic. The only difference is whether you are using an add operation or a subtract or a multiply or a divide. So we have checked all these classes and the operate interface as well. And let's go back to the main app now. Now you also see that I've defined a reference of operate here, and each of the switch case block, I'm assigning the object type to this interface reference. So I'm using the concept of dynamic binding, which we talked about when we talked about interfaces, that we can also do dynamic binding where we can assign an object to an interface type. And the object type will depend upon the expression. So once we have filled that based on the case, while filtering out this expression and picking up plus, star, and divide sequentially, then we go to the next line outside the switch case block, which is to pick the next number from the queue. Remember, we already did one poll here. So as per this example, 4 was here in this res. And now when we do this number.poll again, 5 will be picked up because that will be the next head of the queue. So we pick up 5 here, and then we call operate.getResult. Now this getResult will be called based on the expression which was encountered first in the queue. Again, looking at the example, the first expression encountered will be plus. So the expression was plus. So the operate type object is of add type. And when you call operate.getResult, the getResult method of add class is going to get invoked, and it is going to sum 4 and 5. This res is holding 4 right now based on what I described here, numbers.poll. And this num is holding the second operand, basically 5 here. So 4 plus 5 gets evaluated here in this case. And then it again goes back here and it checks if the number queue is now empty. No, it is still not empty because we still have 3 and 2 left there. So again, it does the operations.poll and it picks up multiply sign here. Then it again runs the switch case. Since it's a multiply sign, it will go here and it will initialize the operate interface reference as the object of multiply class. Then coming here, it will do a numbers.poll. And this time the numbers.poll is going to pick up 3. So 3 will be picked up here. And then the current value of result, which is already 9, 4 plus 5 was 9. The current value of result will be updated here. So res will be 9 here and num will be 3 here. And when you call operate.getResult, the multiply classes getResult will get called and it will say 9 into 3, which will become 27. It will again go back here to this particular line and it will check again if the numbers queue is now empty. No, it is still not empty because we still have one element left. Then it polls the queue of the operations where the expression divide is present there, which is the only element left in this particular operations queue. And since we have the OPR value as divide, this case block gets called and the new divide class gets initialized. The divide class basically gets initialized. And we come here and we do numbers.poll. Now the last number which is available in this queue is 2, which gets picked up here. And then we again call operate.getResult. This time, since the operate operate reference type was of divide class type, so when we call operate.getResult, the divide operation or the getResult method of the divide class, basically this method will get invoked and it will divide the current value of result, which was 4 plus 5, 9 into 3, which was 27. So it is going to divide 27 by 2, which was the last value of the numbers.poll. It is going to execute 27 by 2, and whatever value it gets, it is going to store a value back into the rest variable. And then it is again going to go back here and again going to check the condition if the numbers queue is not empty, but now the numbers queue is empty because 2 was the last element. So it is going to come out of the loop and it is going to print the final result. That is how this whole program is working. Now let's try to see this in action and we'll try to execute the exact same expression. So if I right click and go to run as and run this as Java application, and I supply an expression saying 4 plus 5 star 3 divide 2. And if I now hit enter, I get the value as 13.5, which is exactly what we ran through because 4 plus 5 will be evaluated first, which will result into 9. Then 9 into 3 will be 27 and 27 divided by 2 will be 13.5 exactly. So this is how this whole program is running, where we first take the inputs and then we divide the input into numbers and operation arrays or in fact queues. And once we have those queues built up, then we pick up the first number and we keep running this loop till the numbers queue is not empty. Inside the while loop, at each step, we pick up the first expression or the operator. We check what is the operator, whether it is an addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division operator. And whatever kind of operator we have, we initialize the corresponding class of it. And then we fetch the next value in the numbers queue. And then we call the get result based on the expression. And whatever result we get from the get result, we store it back into the rest variable. So we keep updating the rest variable at every step. So that's the reason the result of 4 plus 5 gets stored in the rest. And next time you are calling the get result for a multiply operation, here the rest value is 9 now, and it says 9 into 3. Again, in the next time, the rest value will be updated to 27 because we are storing the result back into the result variable. So this is all I want to cover in this particular session, where we looked at an example of a calculator application purely from the console standpoint. Obviously, there can be a lot more stuff which we can do into this particular application, make it more error-free and cover a lot of corner cases like validating the inputs, etc. Also, looking at putting some conditions around the exception handling the divide by zero scenario, etc., which is not here. But this is just to show you the basic idea of how you can build simple to complex CLI applications using the core Java concepts. So in this example, we are going to have a look at a calculator application. And this calculator application supports primarily 4 different operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So let's see how do we build that app. So in front of me right now is open the main class. So I have a main app class here, which has a public static void main method. And the first thing we see is a read input class, which is calling a read method. So if you go to the read input class, it has a simple static method here, which is the read method, and it is using the scanner class. If you remember, I talked about the scanner class, which is used to take inputs from the command line from the user. So we initialize the scanner class and we start taking the inputs, and whatever the user inputs in terms of the expression, let's say the user entered 4 plus 5 or whatever, that whole expression gets sent back into this input line as a string. And that comes back here in the input expression. Once we have captured the input expression, the next thing we do is divide the input expression in the numbers and the operators. Basically, an expression would be either something like 4 plus 5 into 3 divided by 2, let's say. Let's say the user entered this expression. So this has either numbers or operators. So that's what we are doing here. We are using the split method of the string API, the string class basically. And this split method is going to split the numbers and operators into 2 different string arrays. And here I'm providing the split expression that split at every time you encounter one of these symbols. So this, when you execute this particular statement, it is going to return a numbers array, which will be created based on this expression. So you will get an array with 4, 5, 3, and 2. And similarly, in the operator array, you are going to split or pick out the elements every time you receive a number. So this operator array is going to hold this plus sign, this multiply sign, and this divide sign. Hope you get the understanding that we are just splitting the whole expression into 2 different arrays, where first array is holding only the numbers and no mathematical expressions, and second array is just holding the mathematical operators and no numbers. And we'll see why we need to do that in the upcoming lines. Once I've created this string array, I just want to store or convert these string arrays into a queue. So I convert this array into a list by calling the array.asList. So this expression is going to return a list. And then I'm going to convert this normal list into a linked list, and then going to store this linked list into the queue of numbers. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the operator array as well, converting this into a generic list, converting that generic list into a linked list, and then storing this linked list as a queue. So I have an operators queue and I have a numbers queue. Both of them have been stored into a queue now. And then I'm using the poll method. If you remember, the poll method of the queue is used when you want to fetch the first front element, the head element of the queue. So whichever element is sitting at the head of the queue will be taken out the moment you call the poll method. So I fetch the first number from the numbers queue. So in this case, 4 will be fetched here in this variable. And after that, I run a loop on the numbers queue. And I'm going to run this particular loop till this particular queue is not empty. If you see, there's a negation here. So I'm going to pick up numbers one by one from this numbers queue till the number queue becomes empty. And inside the loop, I do the exact same poll operation for the operations queue. So this operations queue is holding all these mathematical operations like plus, star, and divide. So I'm going to pick the head of it. So in this case, plus will be picked up and will be stored in this variable called OPR. And then I'm going to run a switch case on this OPR. Basically, as I told you, in this particular calculator application, we are supporting 4 operations, which are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So I define a case for each of the mathematical expression. So you see there are 4 different cases here. And for each case, I'm initializing a class. If it's a plus sign, then I'm initializing the add class. If it's a minus sign, then I'm initializing the subtract class. For multiplication, I have a class called multiply. And for division, I have a class called divide. Let's have a look at what these classes are containing. So if I go to the add class, first of all, it is implementing an interface called operate. And this operate interface has just a single method called getResults, which is accepting a variable argument array. If you remember, I told you that you can also use a var_arg array. This is called a var_arg expression. This means that this numbers will be an array of arbitrary length. It can be a 1-element array, it can be a 2-element array, it can be a 4-element array, or whatever you supply. But it is still going to be a fixed length array, but the length is going to be dependent upon how much argument you supply to this particular method. So that is what this interface operate is doing. It just has one method declared, which is called getResult, which is accepting an array of numbers. So if the add class is implementing the operate interface, then it has to override the getResult method. And here it is just doing a summation of all the numbers which have been supplied. So if you supply 4 numbers, it is just going to add up those 4 numbers and return the sum. And the exact same kind of logic or similar logic will be seen in other operate classes. So if I go to the subtract class, it runs the exact same operation, but it subtracts the values. If I go to the multiply class, it is also implementing the operate interface. And in the get result, it is just multiplying all the values. Similarly, in the divide class, it is also implementing the operate interface, and it is dividing all the numbers one by one. So it's doing pretty much the same thing in terms of the expression and the logic. The only difference is whether you are using an add operation or a subtract or a multiply or a divide. So we have checked all these classes and the operate interface as well. And let's go back to the main app now. Now you also see that I've defined a reference of operate here, and each of the switch case block, I'm assigning the object type to this interface reference. So I'm using the concept of dynamic binding, which we talked about when we talked about interfaces, that we can also do dynamic binding where we can assign an object to an interface type, and the object type will depend upon the expression. So once we have filled that based on the case, while filtering out this expression and picking up plus, star, and divide sequentially, then we go to the next line outside the switch case block, which is to pick the next number from the queue. Remember, we already did one poll here. So as per this example, 4 was here in this res. And now when we do this number.poll again, 5 will be picked up because that will be the next head of the queue. So we pick up 5 here, and then we call operate.getResult. Now this getResult will be called based on the expression which was encountered first in the queue. Again, looking at the example, the first expression encountered will be plus. So the expression was plus. So the operate type object is of add type. And when you call operate.getResult, the getResult method of add class is going to get invoked, and it is going to sum 4 and 5. This res is holding 4 right now based on what I described here, numbers.poll. And this num is holding the second operand, basically 5 here. So 4 plus 5 gets evaluated here in this case. And then it again goes back here and it checks if the number queue is now empty? No, it is still not empty because we still have 3 and 2 left there. So again, it does the operations.poll and it picks up multiply sign here. Then it again runs the switch case. Since it's a multiply sign, it will go here and it will initialize the operate interface reference as the object of multiply class. Then coming here, it will do a numbers.poll. And this time the numbers.poll is going to pick up 3. So 3 will be picked up here. And then the current value of result, which is already 9, 4 plus 5 was 9. The current value of result will be updated here. So res will be 9 here and num will be 3 here. And when you call operate.getResult, the multiply classes getResult will get called and it will say 9 into 3, which will become 27. It will again go back here to this particular line and it will check again if the numbers queue is now empty. No, it is still not empty because we still have one element left. Then it polls the queue of the operations where the expression divide is present there, which is the only element left in this particular operations queue. And since we have the OPR value as divide, this case block gets called and the new divide class gets initialized. The divide class basically gets initialized and we come here and we do numbers.poll. Now the last number which is available in this queue is 2, which gets picked up here. And then we again call operate.getResult. This time, since the operate operate reference type was of divide class type, so when we call operate.getResult, the divide operation or the getResult method of the divide class, basically this method will get invoked and it will divide the current value of result, which was 4 plus 5, 9 into 3, which was 27. So it is going to divide 27 by 2, which was the last value of the numbers.poll. So it is going to execute 27 by 2 and whatever value it gets, it is going to store the result value back into the rest variable. And then it is again going to go back here and again going to check the condition if the numbers queue is not empty, but now the numbers queue is empty because 2 was the last element. So it is going to come out of the loop and it is going to print the final result. That is how this whole program is working. Now let's try to see this in action. And we'll try to execute the exact same expression. So if I right click and go to run as and run this as Java application, and I supply an expression saying 4 plus 5 star 3 divide 2. And if I now hit enter, I get the value as 13.5, which is exactly what we ran through because 4 plus 5 will be evaluated first, which will result into 9. Then 9 into 3 will be 27 and 27 divided by 2 will be 13.5 exactly. So this is how this whole program is running, where we first take the inputs and then we divide the input into numbers and operation arrays or in fact queues. And once we have those queues built up, then we pick up the first number and we keep running this loop till the numbers queue is not empty. Inside the while loop, at each step, we pick up the first expression or the operator. We check what is the operator, whether it is an addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division operator. And whatever kind of operator we have, we initialize the corresponding class of it. And then we fetch the next value in the numbers queue. And then we call the getResult based on the expression. And whatever result we get from the getResult, we store it back into the rest variable. So we keep updating the rest variable at every step. That's the reason the result of 4 plus 5 gets stored in the rest. And next time you are calling the getResult for a multiply operation, here the rest value is 9 now, and it says 9 into 3. Again, in the next time, the rest value will be updated to 27 because we are storing the result back into the result variable. So this is all I want to cover in this particular session, where we looked at an example of a calculator application purely from the console standpoint. Obviously, there can be a lot more stuff which we can do into this particular application, make it more error-free and cover a lot of corner cases like validating the inputs, etc. Also looking at putting some conditions around the exception handling the divide by zero scenario, etc., which is not here. But this is just to show you the basic idea of how you can build simple to complex CLI applications using the core Java concepts.
Let's get started with Spring Boot and how we can build a simple application using Spring Boot. Before we go further, let's understand why we need Spring Boot. And the basic idea of Spring Boot is to build RESTful web services.
If you want to know more about what are RESTful services, please you can read about the RESTful concept. As a concept, what does REST stand for? But the basic idea is that if you are accessing anything over HTTP, then that particular component can be built as a RESTful component. And Spring Boot is the most popular choice for building RESTful web services today. And even in fact microservices, which you might have heard about. So you can build microservices which also run on HTTPs using Spring Boot. So what I'm showing you right now is the official guide of Spring, which you can use to build an application with Spring Boot. It will list down all the requisites which you need in terms of the JDK installations, Maven, and how to complete this guide, etc., etc. You can again use the same Spring initializer which I talked about in the previous session. You can use this to generate a Spring Boot project for you specifically. So all those options are available here. So I've already done that, and I'm not going to repeat what I just did in the previous session, and will directly jump to an IDE where I have created a sample Spring Boot application. And the structure here, you can see the structure would look very similar, with one change, that in the previous example when we were dealing with MVC, we had an src main resources folder, and that src main resources folder was having all the web components or the HTMLs. But since in RESTful web services you do not render the HTML, but you just send back the response. The response body can be pure XML or it can be pure JSON, but you do not send back an view, and that's the main difference between Spring MVC and Spring Boot. That in Spring MVC, you are required to return a view technology. Like in the previous session, we sent a thy_my_life template, which is basically an HTML. You can also return a JSP, but with Spring Boot, you do not deal with the view technology. And that's the world we are living in today. When you write Spring Boot, you do not have to worry about how this is going to be rendered on the web page, whether it is going to be rendered using HTML or whatnot. What you need to take care of using Spring Boot is to return the right response body, the exact text of the response, and that's it. So with that in mind, the Spring Boot was born, and the structure, apart from that, the structure would look very similar. There's a pom.xml here which will provide all the list of jars and dependencies which are required for this particular project. So you can see all the dependencies here, pretty much the similar ones. We have a starter web, we have a starter test, and we have a Spring Boot Maven plugin. And we have an application file, which is the entry point, again having a public static void main method. So you need to put the @Spring Boot application at the top of the class to make it an entry point. If you don't do this, Spring Boot will not run this class, and Spring Boot will even not run your application. So what we are doing as part of this example, that we are just printing all the beans which are provided by Spring. That's all we are doing. Like I said, it's a very lightweight and an introductory session, so we will keep the logics to minimum. And I'm just getting all the bean definitions, sorting the bean definitions, and just printing them one by one. How do you get the bean definition? You get that with this application context class, which is returned when you run the application. And how you run the application is basically using this line where you say Spring application dot run, and you supply application dot class with any command line arguments which you might want to use. Once you do this, it is going to return an application context object to you, and the application context object can be used to get all the bean definitions by calling this method which says get bean definition names. So that's the basic logic which is being run in the main class. Now we also have a controller, but this time it's not a web controller, but it's a REST controller. So you see, in the previous example, we just had written something like this. It was just a pure controller. But here we have become more specific. We are saying that, hey, this is not a simple MVC controller, but this is a Spring Boot controller, or technically a REST controller. So Spring provides a separate annotation for that, which is @REST controller. So you write that particular annotation on the top of the controller class which you are creating, and then you provide a request mapping similar to what we did in Spring MVC. But while you return it, you do not return a view technology. You just return the raw response. Here I'm just returning a string, but you can return a JSON object, you can return an XML object, or whatever you want to, but not a view technology. That's what I'm doing. Like you can see, there's literally nothing I'm doing in this. It's just a simple string return statement which I've printed here. And that's all the code I have right now here. I just have these two classes. Okay, so that was all about what I have written in the project, and now it's time to run the project. So I have just reached to the location inside my terminal where the project's pom.xml was present, and if I just do an ls, you will see that there is a pom.xml available here, and all the code directories are also available here. So now I will just run this application, and to run this application I'm just going to type mvn spring-boot: run and hit enter. Once I do that, the Spring Boot application is going to get started, and let's go back to the controller and actually the main endpoint and see what we were doing there. I did a sysout here which said let's inspect the beans provided by Spring Boot, and then I was printing all the bean names. And if I go back to the output, I will see the same line being written here, which was around let's inspect the beans. So you can see that message which says let's inspect the beans provided by Spring Boot, and then all the beans which are available in the application context are printed here. So that's the basic idea which I want to give you, that you can actually build a Spring Boot application and you can write your REST controllers, return a string body from it, and once this is run, then you can also run your application from the web browser as well. So let's try to hit that particular URL which I wrote here. So the URL of hello country. So for that, let me just open a new Cognito window, and our application is already running. So if I just say http localhost 8080/, I get this message here which says greetings from Spring Boot, and this is the message which we were sending from the REST controller. So this validates our understanding that we can invoke a REST controller, which is a Spring Boot REST controller, via the same method, but this time we are not getting an HTML, but we are just returning this particular string. Now you can use the string in any ways you want, so it depends upon the consumer. So that's all I want to cover as part of the Spring Boot. Now Spring Boot is a huge topic, and we can spend hours and hours talking about Spring Boot, but since this is more of an introductory session, so I just wanted the concept to get introduced, and remember the value proposition of why you would need Spring Boot. The basic idea is to build RESTful web services or build RESTful microservices. That's the basic idea behind using Spring Boot in your applications. And also remember the difference between Spring MVC application and Spring Boot application. Spring MVC is for building web application. Spring Boot is for building RESTful applications which might not have a web interface integrated with them at that moment.
Let's get started with our demo of a project which is using Spring Boot to build a RESTful web service. So a RESTful web service is nothing but any endpoint which you can access or you can consume the data from via an HTTP layer or via simply a web layer, because most of the web traffic which we deal with is built on HTTP. So to take an example, if you go to any website where you sometimes see on the top right corner, you see today's weather. So how is that today's weather coming in? It's coming in via a REST web service. The website which you are accessing is basically hitting an HTTP endpoint, which is where the weather application is sitting, and it asks for the weather data, and that REST web application just returns the data, and that's how the website is able to show you the current weather. So RESTful web services are everywhere, and they are the most popular way to build applications today, where you just build your RESTful web service and you expose an HTTP URL. And then the consumers need to just access that HTTP URL to consume the data from your application. And you see, this makes it very easy because there is no data type restrictions. There is no tight coupling here. It's just an HTTP endpoint. So that's the basic idea. And we will look at a project where we will be using Spring Boot to build a RESTful web service. And then we will try to run that web service to save some data and also to return some data. So here on the package explorer, you see I have created a project called REST service. And let's just walk through the structure of it, and then we'll go into the details of it. So we have an src main Java where I have a package and I have a bunch of classes here. And before we go to the classes, let's first also access the dependency file, because every project needs some dependencies, some jars to execute it. For example, Spring itself is basically a jar. So you need to include the Spring jar in your project so that your project can become a Spring project. And there are generally two dependency tools. One is Maven and one is Gradle. In this particular project, I am using Maven dependency tool for downloading and managing the dependencies which are needed to run this project successfully. And the way you will find if it's a Maven project or if it's a Gradle project, for a Maven project, you will see a file called pom.xml. And if it's a Gradle project, you will see a .gradle file. That's how you can spot whether the project is using Maven for dependency management or it is using Gradle for dependency management. So let's open the pom.xml. Since it's an XML file, it will be a bit verbose, but if you just read it piece by piece, it will become easier to understand. First of all, since this is a Spring project, I need to include the parent dependency, which brings a lot of good defaults, sensible defaults from Spring Boot automatically. And this is the jar name. This is the artifact ID, which is Spring Boot starter parent. So any Spring Boot project you are starting, do include this parent. This parent is basically bringing all the dependencies from some other jar, and you can make your project as a child of this particular parent. So all the Spring Boot projects have this as a parent as a standard practice. After that, you provide your own details in terms of what is the package name, how do you want to see the jar name, and what is the jar actual name, what is the jar version, etc., etc. You also set the minimum required Java version to run this application. And then you, in the dependency sections, you provide all the jars which you need to run your project successfully, both compile and run your project successfully. So we added the Spring Boot starter web dependency, which basically brings all the dependencies around making a controller or making a repository, context component scan, all the interesting features which Spring provides get wrapped up inside the Spring Boot starter jar. And you can actually go to the MVN repository and have a look at what all classes it provides. It's a lot of classes. So I'm just telling you in a brief that it provides all the RESTful functionality. Then you have the next dependency as Spring Boot starter data JPA, which is going to enable this project to also have a database. And if it has a database, then you need Java to talk to the database. And the way Spring suggests to talk to the database is via using the Spring Boot Data JPA library. We will see this how this library can be used, but basically this provides ways to represent your Java object in the database. And then you need to also add the actual dependency of the database. And in this case, we are using an in-memory H2 database. So I'm not using an external database like MySQL or Oracle or PostgreSQL, because that will just make more configurations more complicated. I just wanted to keep it simple. And generally, you in this H2 database, you can easily access by adding this dependency, and it will be an in-memory database created for you. Then I've also added Spring Boot starter test here, which will be used whenever you are writing unit tests, and you must write unit test for your project. And then we need to add the plugin so that Spring Boot can run this project. That's all I have in the pom.xml. Now let's move to the interesting part, the Java section part. Let's start from the main class. So this is how the main class looks like, where you just create any name with the class, and then you add a public static void main method. Inside the public static void main method, you call Spring application dot run. And this run method is basically going to run your application, and you just provide the same class name which you just wrote here. So you just say dot class. And if you're supplying any command line arguments, it can interpret that command line arguments as well if you want. So you'd always need an entry point in an application, and this is the entry point which Spring Boot supports. And this is, if you see this code, this is just normal code. To make Spring be aware about this class being treated as an entry point, you need to add @Spring Boot application annotation on top of the class. This is one of the annotation which is coming directly from the Spring Boot library. You can see this import. So once you add this, then only Spring will be able to treat this class as an entry point. Otherwise, Spring doesn't know where to start from. So when you run Spring, it will try to find a class with an annotation Spring Boot application. And then inside the class, it will try to find a public static void main method. And once it has found both of them, then it will just run the application. So it's very simple, nothing fancy here. And what we are dealing with here is a student object. So we will try to insert a student object, and we will try to retrieve the student object. So if you ignore these annotations which I've added, it's just a pure POJO. It's just a plain old Java object. You create a student class, Let's ignore this field as well for now. I'll just come back to this annotation in this field. But this is just a student class. It has three fields as name, age, and address, an empty constructor and a parameterized constructor, and some getters. Intentionally, I have removed the setters because generally, whenever you are building any enterprise grade application, you would like to keep your objects immutable. Means once they have been created, you would not like somebody to allow to change the values of the object. This just makes programming much more easy if you treat all the objects in your application as immutable. That's why I have not added setters here. It's just considered a good practice. So apart from the standard things which we have already seen, there are two things here which I want to talk about. Let's first talk about this one. So @entity is the annotation which is coming from Java X persistence entity, and this makes Spring Boot save this particular object into the database. This is the annotation which you need to put on your class so that Spring Boot knows that this class represents a table in the database. So you need to add this to make sure that this represents a table. Second thing, a table will have a ID. It will have sort of a primary key. So I've created a new column called ID, which is basically representing the student's roll number or something, or maybe a registration number. And here I'm using a couple of more annotations. If you see, these annotations are also coming from Java X persistence library. And these annotations will basically allow a new ID to be created every time you create a student object. So you don't have to specify the value of this ID variable. Spring Boot will automatically generate a new ID value every time you create a new student object. And how does it generate? You can provide the generation type as well. So currently I've just set it as automatic, but you can set it as identity, sequence, or return or controlled by table. You can also see the explanation of each of these here. But I've just kept it as auto, which basically let the persistence provider pick any appropriate strategy for the particular database. In our case, the database is H2. So that's about the entity class. Let's call this as entity class. Now let's move to the repository. So you need a repository class. Like I explained in that three-tier architecture, you always need a DAO layer or a repository layer to store your student object into the database. So we have enabled the student object to be saved, but we need a handler which can save this particular file, this particular object into the database. And the repository classes are the classes which will allow you to do that. So you create a very simple interface. You name whatever you want to name your interface as, and then you say extends JPA repository, the type of the object, and the unique identifier of the object. So the type of the object is student here, and the unique identifier of the student object is the ID, which is of type long. So you need to just supply the types, type of the object, type of the primary key, or the type of the unique identifier. And this annotation is coming from Spring Boot. You can see specifically Spring Boot data library, which we added. So you just need to create an interface, extend it from JPA repository, and make sure that you add this annotation as well. Spring heavily uses the concept of annotations, and this will help Spring understand that this is a repository layer class, and it will apply some more metadata to this class while this class is running in the JVM. So what happens here? You just created an interface. You did not provide any method to create or any method to delete or any method to get a student object, because all of that is automatically provided by Spring Boot via the JPA repository class. If we go inside this class, and if you scroll down, you'll see the find all method, find all by ID, save all, flush, save and flush, delete, etc. And if you go further up, this also extends the paging and sorting repository, which provides pagination and sorting facilities. But the interesting one is that paging and sorting repository again extends a CRUD repository. And if you go to the CRUD repository, you will find all the basic methods to save an entity, save multiple entities, find an entity by the ID. That's why it needed that long type to make sure that it can execute this method. You can check the existence of an object, find all the entries, find all by ID, count them, delete them. So all the basic CRUD functionality. So we call them as CRUD because the reason it is called CRUD because create, read, update, delete. That's basically the generic acronym. So because this CRUD repository provides all the methods and their implementations automatically, we do not need to write any code at all. So that's why Spring Boot is so awesome, and that's why Spring Boot is very popular, because it's zero code in the repository and you still get all the CRUD functionality. So that's about repository. Now we have covered the entity class, we have covered the repository class, we have covered the entry point class. Now the only thing which is remaining is the endpoint, the HTTP endpoint which I talked about, and that you can create by creating any class. Generally, try to suffix it with the controller so that your core developers can easily find this class, and make sure that you put @REST controller annotation on top of it. This annotation will allow Spring to treat this particular class as an endpoint class. Then you can auto wire the student repository. So if you remember, I talked about the whole dependency injection and inversion of control. So here dependency injection is in action. So here you're just telling student controller to auto wire the student repository. And now what will happen that at runtime, student controller, or actually Spring, will automatically create an object of the student repository and supply that object of student repository to student controller. So you as developer do not have to create an object of student repository explicitly. That's the benefit, and that's how the dependency injection is working, because you inverted the dependencies now. The dependency is just injected into the class, and as a developer, you don't have to take control of creating the objects. It's the Spring which will automatically read the auto-word annotation and will automatically supply an object whenever it is required. Then I have two methods here. Since we are talking about HTTP endpoints, so I have represented a post method here and a get method here. The way you will write a post method is via @post mapping annotation, and then you can provide the URL path on which somebody should call your endpoint to save something. So for example, somebody can call it HTTP localhost 8080/student/create. Whenever they hit that URL, the control or that request will directly hit this particular method. Why? Because you have provided the URL mapping here in the post mapping annotation. So since it's a post method, there would be request body. What is the actual request body which the client is sending? And you can represent that request body with the @request body annotation, and you can provide the type of the request body. And here I'm saying that, hey, if you want to access this particular URL, yes, all good, but you need to supply me with a text representation of the student object or a JSON representation of the student object. And then inside the method, I'm calling student repository dot save, which is going to save the student object which is coming in. So you see there's a lot going on here. I will show you how the student is represented in the request body as well, and then I will come back to how it got converted from JSON to Java. But this is how you can store this particular student object. You can hit this API as many times as you want and keep inserting a new student object every time. Then if you want to fetch a particular student, then you can do that by supplying the /student. And then in the curly braces, there's an ID written here. So basically you can supply the value of the ID of the student. So generally there would be another method here, which would be find all, to see all the students and with their ID, and then you can pick a particular student's ID, supply that student ID value here dynamically. That's why the curly braces supports dynamic value. So here it can insert 1, 2, 3, or whatever the student ID you want to fetch the value for. You provide that value in the student/ID, and all good. Then if somebody is hitting the URL with saying localhost 8080/student/1, then student with the ID 1 will be returned from the request. And you need to put @get mapping to make sure that this method is treated as an HTTP get method. And you can provide the type, you can say get student, and here this dynamic value is captured with the @path variable, because you need to know the ID, right? Whatever ID somebody has supplied it in the URL, you need to capture that IDE and then use that IDE for calling the repository. So you can do that by using the @path variable. So here I'm just saying whatever ID is coming in, I will store that value inside this IDE. Once I've done that, then I can again call student repository dot find by ID, which is again a built-in method provided to me by the CRUD repository. I can supply the ID, and this actually is going to return an optional object, which is an object which may or may not contain a value. So it's just a defensive programming style. So this will return an optional, and you can call a get method to return the actual student object. This will return an optional of student. So optional of student means that this optional object may have a student or may not have a student. Why did Spring do that? Because the ID somebody is supplying, that ID can be invalid also, right? So optional object takes care of that if there is no student found, then you will not get a null pointer exception. And if there's a student found, you can return that. So it's just a defensive programming style which Spring has adopted by returning an optional of the student object rather than directly the student object. But if you're confident that this particular optional of student object does contain a student object, then just call optional.get, which I've called here, which will return the actual student object sitting inside the optional object. You can read more about the optional object and its usage from the official Java docs, and there are tons of examples available on it on internet. So this is about the controller. We have covered all the classes. Now it's time to run the application. So you go to the command prompt, you go to the particular file folder location, and there you just say mvn spring-boot:run. So I just hit enter, and this is going to run the application. It's going to spit some logs here, and if everything is fine, you will not get an error, and you will just be getting a message saying that application got started. And it's running on Tomcat localhost 8080 with no context URL. So this is not a web application. This is a RESTful web service, right? This is a RESTful service. This is not a web application. So there is no web interface. So how do you access this? You just have an HTTP URL. So you can use any of the REST client available on the internet. There are probably hundreds of different REST clients available on the internet. You can choose any one of them. I am using advanced REST client, which you can also install as an extension from the Chrome browser itself. So if I just open the Chrome browser and I just say REST client, if you just write this and hit enter, you will get many different options. And the first option you get is from Google Play Store's App Store. So you can go to the App Store, basically the Chrome Web Store, not the Play Store, but the Chrome Web Store, and you can just install this. Since this is already installed, you can click on Launch App, and it will open this interface for you. So this is this is not a tutorial for advanced REST client, so I'll just be quick here. You can choose the method type which you want to hit. So let's say I want to do a post, and then you can provide the URL here. So remember the URL which we put here in the controller method, this has to exactly match. So HTTP localhost/student/create should be the URL. So let me just copy paste this one here. Okay, so the URL is good here. It's a post type of method which I want to do, and I want to hit this particular URL. Now I need to supply the content type and the body. So in the content type, you can choose application JSON because I'm going to supply a JSON object. And in the body, this is how the JSON object looks like. Advanced REST client also provides a nice visual interface to basically create this JSON. If you are thinking that JSON creation is very tough, it's not actually tough. It's just curly braces. And then you put key and value, comma, let me just put an enter here so that it's more readable. So you just put curly braces starting and end, and then you just put key value. You put a key, which is the variable name and the variable's value, variable name, variable value. And these keys have to exactly match the student's properties. So the student.java had this name, age, and address, right? So it has to exactly match. Otherwise, this request will fail. So this is all good. Now I can send this particular request. When you click send, it is going to hit my Spring Boot application, which is running on localhost 8080. It is going to call the student/create method. It is also going to convert this JSON into a Java object because here I'm supplying a Java object. So it will convert the JSON, which I'm sending from here, to Java object automatically, and it is going to automatically save it here because I've called the repository.save method. So let's hit send here. Once I hit send, I get a 200 OK. It means everything went fine. And in the response header, I get the object back because I have returned the object here. You see, this save method is going to return the same student object which you created. So everything is good here. My object has been stored here. And now it's time to fetch the object. So it has already been saved into the H2 in-memory database, and you can obviously go and connect to the in-memory H2 database and have a look at it. But for simplicity, I'm just going to do this here. And let's say the first object is generally added as the ID 1 by default by the H2 database. So let's hit this particular URL. When I hit this URL, it is going to hit the student controller here. And in the student controller, it is going to hit the get student method, which is having a student/ID URL, and it is going to find the database with that ID. And if it finds a student object with that ID, it is going to return that. So let's confirm that now. So let's hit this particular send button, and it is going to hit a get request with this particular URL. Spring Boot is going to find if a student with the ID 1 exists in its database. So once I hit send, I get a 200 OK. And you see in the response headers, I get the same student object back, which I added. Let's try with 2 now. Let's see what happens. I see 2 and I get 500 internal server error because there is no object stored in the H2 database of the Spring application with the ID 2 yet, because we only inserted one object. That's why only one student object is there, and the first ID which H2 database created for it automatically was 1. So when you hit for get request with a student ID 1, you get the object. When you put any invalid value and you hit this, you get a 500 internal server error. You can also make it look nice by not sending the 500 internal server error and sending a nice exception from the backend. So from here, you can also send a nice exception that if this object is not found, you can say something like that, or else throw, which is again an optional object. And here you can supply a particular type of exception which you want to supply instead of just throwing 500 internal server error. But that's just additional defensive programming you can do. You can add more and more validations and constraints into this project as you build this project in a more complex paradigm. So this is basically what I wanted to show you, that that we have created a Spring Boot application. We have connected it to a database. We have created also an HTTP endpoint with student controller. We ran that application. We used any random REST client. In my case, I used advanced REST client. And we first did a post request. We provided the exact URL. The URL has to exactly match with the controller URL. And then the body, the request body also has to exactly match with the student objects property, especially the case of the names have to exactly match. So if all this matches, then you will get a response back that the object has been created. If you want to fetch the value of the object, you're going to use the HTTP GET method, and you again provide a URL which has to exactly match to some method in some controller in the Spring Boot application, which is running on localhost. And if you provide the right ID, you are going to get a valid result. If you provide an invalid ID, you're going to get a 500 internal server error. And from here on, you can make this controller as robust and as mature as you want. You can add find all method. You can add a update student method. You can add a delete student method. You can have all different kinds of filters. Like, for example, return to me all the students starting with the name A, or return all the first students with the roll number 1 and 100, or between 1 and 100. So you can write as many endpoints as you want and build this application in with as much maturity and as much complexity as you want.
We all know that Java is one of the most sought programming languages in the current IT industry. There are multiple multi-million-dollar companies which are using Java till today. So this video is completely dedicated to help out the Java developers and the beginners in Java programming language to crack the most frequently asked Java interview questions. So without further ado, let's begin with our interview questions. At first, we will start with the beginner level interview questions. So in the beginner level interview questions, the first question we have is, what is JIT? So the answer for this question is, JIT is an abbreviation for Java In-Time Compiler. It increases efficiency of the interpreter by compiling the bytecode in the runtime. JIT, or Just-in-Time Compiler, compiles code to machine level directly for higher speeds of code execution. So basically, just-in-time compilation is a feature added to the interpreter of Java. So this involves conversion of the code directly to machine level during the compilation stage. This improvises the speed of execution of a Java program. Now, after the first question, the second question in the docket is, what is a class loader? Now let's discuss the answer for this particular question. So basically, class loader is the first file to load when you execute any Java program. So the Java class loader is the integrated part of Java virtual machine. So the functionality of class loader is to load the class to the Java virtual machine while it is demanded to execute a class. Java has Bootstrap extension and application type of class loaders. So the third question in the docket is, what are the memory allocations available in Java? So the answer for this particular question is, Java provides multiple types of memory allocations, but the 5 major types of memory allocations which are most frequently used are class memory, heap memory, stack memory, program counter memory, native method stack memory. So the next question in the list is, will the program run if I write static public void main. So basically we write public static void main, but in case, imagine if I write the program as static public void main, will the program execute properly? So the answer for this question is yes, because Java does not follow any specific rule for the order of specifiers you place in your program. So when you execute the program with such pattern in your specifiers, then the program will compile successfully. Also, it will run successfully. So the next question we have is, what is the default value stored in local variables? So in C programming language, when you declare a local variable or a global variable or any type of variable, then the first value which is stored inside that variable will be a garbage value, unless you initialize the variable with a personalized value. For example, if you declare a variable I equal to 0, then you are storing a value in that variable I, that is 0. If you just declare it as int I, then the value stored inside that I variable will be a garbage value. So similarly, when you declare some kind of local variable in Java, then what will be the default value stored inside it? So the answer for this question is neither the local variables or the global variables or any primitives or any object references do not have any kind of default value stored in them. So followed by the fifth question, we have the sixth question. So what would be the output of the following code segment is the sixth question. So this might happen sometimes. So basically what happens is your interviewer will throw a question at you which has a code segment. So all you need to do is decode that code in your mind and provide the output. So this would be the code that we will be dealing with. So you can see our question has two printf statements. The first one has 100 plus 100 plus a string which is Simplilearn, and in the second printf statement we have a string that is e-learning company plus 100 plus 100. So what will be the output of these two printf statements? So the answer for this question is really simple. So we'll be having 200 Simplilearn as the first output and e-learning company 100 as the second output. Why? Let's check out the code segment once again. So when you see the code segment once again, so the first printf statement has 100 plus Simplilearn. So JVM here understands 100 as an integer value and the plus symbol as an addition operator here. So followed by the addition operator, we have another integer value. So what JVM does is it adds the two numbers 100 plus 100. So followed by that we have another plus symbol here. So followed by the plus symbol we have a string value. So here the JVM considers the plus symbol as a concatenating operator but not as an addition operator. So that's why the first two numbers got added and the result was 200 and the next two values were concatenated. So it became as 200 Simplilearn. Similarly, in the second printf statement, the JVM encountered with a string value. So it considered the plus symbol as a concatenating operator. Similarly, it happened with the second plus symbol as well. So that's the reason we had e-learning 100 as the second output. Now followed by the sixth question, we have the seventh question. What is an association? So the answer for this question is an association can be defined as a relationship that has no ownership over the other. So to understand this definition, we can consider a simple example. Consider a person associated with multiple banks. So consider person X who has got accounts in bank A, bank B and bank C. And similarly, a bank is associated with person X. That is, a bank A, bank B and bank C are associated with the person X. But no one has ownership over the other. A person X who is an account holder with all the three banks, that is A, B and C, does not possess any kind of ownership over the three banks. Similarly, banks A, B and C who has the customer, which is the person X, but the banks do not possess any kind of ownership over the customer. So the relationship between the person X and the banks ABC can be considered as an association. Now followed by the 7th question, we have the next question, that is the 8th question. Define copy constructor in Java. So the answer for this question is as follows. A copy constructor in Java is a constructor that initializes an object through another object of the same class. A copy constructor in Java is really helpful because when you want to copy a complex object that has several fields, or when we want to make a deep copy of an existing object, then the copy constructor is the one which will help you out in this situation. So followed by the 8th question, we have the 9th question. What is a marker interface? So the answer for this question is, an empty interface in Java is referred as a marker interface. Serializable and clonable are some of the popular examples of marker interface. So basically a marker interface is just another interface, but normally in interface we provide some signatures. So these signatures belong to particular methods. So in normal interface we just have method signatures, but not the complete implementation, or at least we'll be having some variables. But in a marker interface we do not have any kind of data manipulating method signatures, any data members, nothing. They have special functionality unlike a normal interface. So followed by the 9th question, we have the 10th question. What is object cloning? I guess the word object cloning is completely self-explanatory, yet the answer for this question is, it is an ability to recreate an object completely similar to the existing object. This process is known as object cloning in Java. Java provides a built-in function or method, that is the clone method, to clone an existing object, offering the same functionality that of the original object. So followed by the 10th question, we have our 11th question. Why is Java not completely object-oriented? So this question might be a little confusing, but it's true. Java is not completely object-oriented. But what's the reason? Yes, I'll explain you why Java is not completely object-oriented. So the answer for this question is, Java is not considered as 100% object-oriented programming language because of the data types it uses. It still makes use of 8 or more primitive data types, which are int, float, double, and few others. So this is the only reason why Java is not considered as completely 100% object-oriented programming language. So the next question is, define wrapper classes in Java. So the answer for this question is, in Java, when you declare primitive data types, that is the int, float, double, etc., then the wrapper classes are responsible for converting them into objects or reference types. Just as we discussed before, Java is not 100% object-oriented programming language just because of the primitive data types it uses. So when you include such primitive data types, then wrapper classes are the ones which convert them into objects or reference types for the ease of compilation and execution of programs without any issues. So followed by this question, we have the next question. Define singleton classes in Java. So the answer for this question is, in Java, when you make the constructor of a class as private, then the particular class can generate only one single object. This is the reason why such type of classes are called as singleton classes. So followed by that, we have our next question that says, define package in Java. So if you use some of the popular IDEs, that is the integrated development enterprises such as IntelliJ or Eclipse, then you might be familiar with projects, packages, source files, and then the class file. So basically you create a project first, and inside the project you will be having your source folder, and then you will be creating your own package using the source folder, and inside the package you will create a class file, and inside the class file is where you write your Java program. So here the question is, define package in Java. So the answer for this question is as follows. package is a collective bundle of classes and interfaces along with necessary libraries and jar files. The use of packages helps in code reusability. So basically, when you create a specific package, inside that package you will store all the class files that you will be using in your Java program. So not only class files, in case if you use any kind of connectors or any kind of jar files or any kind of dependencies for your Java program, you will include all those inside the package so that the requirements and the class files are bundled together, and this helps out in code reusability, making sure that the program files or the jar files or any dependencies are not juggling between one package to the other or one file to the other. So using a package is basically a good practice. So followed by this, we have our next question. Can you implement pointers in Java program? So if you remember C programming language, we had pointers there. So we use pointers to directly access the memory. So similarly, can you use pointers in a Java program? This is a little tricky question for beginners, but basically it's really simple. Now the answer for this question is no, because Java Virtual Machine personally takes care of memory management implicitly. So Java's major motto was to keep programming simple. So accessing memory directly through pointers is not a recommended action. So the answer is a big no. You cannot implement pointers in Java program. So followed by that, we have our next question. Differentiate between instance and local variables. So the answer for this question is really simple. Instance variables are declared inside a class and the scope is limited to only a specific object inside which an instance variable is created. So followed by the instance variable, we have the local variable. So the local variable can be anywhere inside a method or a specific block of code. Also, the scope is limited to the block of code where the variable, that is the local variable, is declared. Now followed by the 16th question, we have our next question. Explain Java string pool. So the answer for this question is a collection of strings in Java's heap memory is referred as Java's string pool. So for example, you wanted to create a new string. Consider your name. So your name might be some XYZ. So if you wanted to create XYZ string, then you provide that particular code to your JVM. So what does JVM do? It will not directly create that particular string. First, it will search for the XYZ string in your string pool. If that is already existing in your string pool, then it will provide a reference to that particular string. In case if XYZ is not there, then the JVM will create a new string, that is the XYZ string. So followed by this, we have our next question, that is, what is an exception? So the answer for this question is, an exception in Java is considered as an unexpected event that can disrupt the normal flow of the program. So for example, just consider that you are going to write a program for division operator. So after you finish your program, your evaluator might want to test your code to the extreme levels. So instead of providing a proper number, imagine that your evaluator is providing a wrong input, such as special symbols, sometimes 0 or any other sort of input. So if this kind of input is provided to your program, then your program might crash. So you can avoid this kind of crash by using exception handling. So basically you can use try and catch blocks. So you can embed your code inside the try block and say to your program that if any kind of wrong input such as special symbol or 0 is provided by the evaluator, then send a message saying wrong input or divide by 0 exception. So this kind of approach will provide an output, but this kind of approach will avoid your program from crashing. So this is how exceptions are handled in real time. So followed by this, we have our next question. What is final keyword in Java? So the answer for this question is, the term final is a predefined word in Java that is used while declaring values to variables. When a value is declared using the final keyword, then that particular value of that particular variable will remain constant throughout the execution of program. So sometimes if you include a normal variable and provide an operation on that particular variable, then the value of that particular variable will change after the execution of program. But when you declare the same variable using final keyword, then no number of operations or any kind of manipulations applied onto that variable will not change the value of that particular variable. So that's the speciality of final keyword in Java. So followed by that, we'll dive into the next question, that is, what happens when the main method is not declared as static? So the answer for this question is, when the main method is not declared as static, then the program may be compiled perfectly but ends up with a serious ambiguity and throws a runtime error that says no such method error. So when you basically declare a main method, don't forget to specify the static keyword. So with this, we finish the beginners segment of questions. Followed by the beginners segment, we have the next segment, that is the intermediate level segment. So the first question in the intermediate level is, what is JDK, and mention the variants of JDK. So the answer for this question is, so JDK is basically an abbreviation for Java Development Kit. This is a combined package of JRE, that is the Java Runtime Environment, and developer tools used for designing Java applications and applets. Oracle has the following variants for Java Development Kit. So the first one is the JDK Standard Edition, which is normally used by beginners and intermediate developers. Next, after the JDK Standard Edition, we have the Java Development Kit for Enterprise. So this particular Enterprise Edition is used by professional Java developers for developing Java-based applications and frameworks. Now the last one is the Java Development Kit Micro Edition. Now followed by 21st question, we will dive into the next question that says, brief access specifiers and types of access specifiers in Java. So the answer for this question is as follows. Basically, access specifiers are predefined keywords used to help a Java virtual machine to understand the scope of a particular data member or data manipulating method within a class or outside the class. So in Java, we have 4 types of access specifiers. The first one is public access specifier. So when you declare a data member or a data manipulating method as public, then that particular data member or method can be accessible by any class or object throughout the package. Followed by that, we have the private access specifier. So unlike the public access specifier, when you provide the private access specifier, then the accessibility of that particular private data member or the data manipulating method will be provided to specific classes and specific objects only. And finally, we have the protected access specifier. So the protected access specifier is a bit more secure than the private access specifier. So the access for this particular protected data member or protected data manipulating method could be a little more difficult to access unless you are going to implement everything which is present in that particular package. So basically, if you are trying to access the protected data member or protected data manipulating method of a different package, then you need to first import the package into your existing package. So that's how the protected access specifier works practically. So finally, after the major 3 access specifiers, we have the default access specifier. So default access specifier will be provided by the Java virtual machine. So in case if you declare a variable or a data manipulating method without using any specific access specifiers that are public, private and protected, then JVM implicitly considers the default access specifier. So there is no much of a difference between the public access specifier and the default access specifier. Both have the same functionality and accessibility. So followed by this question, we enter into the next question, That is, can a constructor return a value? So the answer for this question is as follows. Yes, a constructor can return a value. It basically returns the current instance of a class implicitly. You cannot make a constructor return a value explicitly, but automatically it returns the instance of a class. So the next question is, explain this keyword in Java. So in Java we do have a keyword which is called as this. So what does the keyword this mean in Java is the question. So the answer for this question is, the term this is a special keyword designated as a reference variable. So the term this keyword is used to refer to the current class properties like data manipulating method, instance, data member, and constructors. So followed by the 24th question, we have our next question that says, explain super keyword in Java. So the answer for this question is as follows. The term super is a special keyword designated as a reference variable. So similar to this keyword, even super keyword acts as a reference variable. But the difference is super keyword is used to refer to the immediate parent class object. So followed by the 25th question, we have our next question that is, explain method overloading in Java. So basically method overloading and method overriding etc. are the concepts of polymorphism. So now let's have a correct answer here. So the process of creating multiple method signatures using one method name is called as method overloading. So for example, consider that you wanted to include an addition operation in your program that performs addition operation. So the first method will be having the name add, and inside the method parameters you'll be having two integer types of parameters. Similarly, you wanted to perform another addition operation with the same name add. So here you will provide the method name completely same to the first method, but inside the parameters there is a difference. You are adding 3 parameters here. So when you pass the values to the add method, then which method to be overloaded? That's the confusion, right? So should I overload or should I execute the first add method or the second add method? So this completely depends on the number of parameters you pass. If you are passing 2 parameters, then the first method will be executed. If you are passing 3 parameters, then the second method will be executed. So this is how the method overloading happens in Java. So the process of method overloading can be achieved by using 2 different ways. The first way is to change the number of arguments. So that's what exactly I've discussed before. Now the second way is varying the return type of the method. So with this, let's enter into the next question. Can we overload a static method? So as discussed before, the values of the variables or data manipulating methods will not be changed when we have used the keyword static in front of it. So the question is, can we overload a static method? Now let's discuss the answer for this. The answer is no. Java does not support overloading of static method. The process would throw an error reading static method cannot be referenced. So followed by this, we have our next question. So the next question is, define late binding. The answer for this question is, binding is a process of unifying the method call with the method's code segment. Late binding happens when the method's code segment is unknown till the method is called during the runtime. So followed by this, we have our next question. Define dynamic method dispatch. So the answer is, the dynamic method dispatch is a process where the method call is executed during the runtime. The overridden method is called through a reference variable of superclass. So this process is called as runtime polymorphism. Now we have our next question. Why is delete function faster in linked list than an array? So basically, linked list and array are the Java collections, or in other words, it's also considered as data structure. So to answer this question, you need to understand the analogy of linked list and array. So basically, an array is a complete memory block of consecutive memory locations. So consider that your memory location starts from 100 and your array has 10 locations. So it's a complete reserved block of from 100, 101, 102 to 109. So you have 10 memory blocks. So in case if you wanted to add a number or delete a number, then you had to make changes to the complete memory block. But when you come into linked list, you have the memory blocks used from the memory heap. So basically what you do here is you basically connect the nodes through addresses. So in case if you wanted to eliminate a number, then what you do is just to manipulate the addresses. So the address of the consecutive node will be changed. So that's the only change what you make. So now this is the reason why the delete function or any kind of manipulation function is faster in linked list compared to array. So now let's have a brief answer on this. Delete function is faster in linked list as the user needs to make a minor update to the pointer value so that the node can point to the next successor in the list. Now followed by this we have our next question. Give a briefing on the life cycle of a thread. So the life cycle of a thread includes 5 stages which are as mentioned below. Newly born state, runnable state, that is it provides the JVM with a feedback that I'm ready to run now, followed by that the running stage where the thread is actually running, followed by that the block stage. So basically the thread will be blocked for some reasons, for some intermediate output or something, if the thread is waiting for an input from another source or something similar. So that's where the blocked state comes to existence. And finally the dead state. Once after everything is processed, the thread is eliminated by JVM. Now followed by this we have our next question that says, explain the differences between the operators provided here. So the operators might look similar but they are different. Now let's understand about these operators in a much better way through the answer. So the answer for this question is, although they look similar, but there's a huge difference between them. So the first operator, which looks like 2 greater than symbols, perform the operation of right shifting. So when you provide a binary number or binary value, then the bits will be shifted towards the right. And the second symbol or the second operator, which is having 3 greater than symbols, is used to shift out the 0 filled bits. So this is the functionality of these two operators. Now followed by that, let's have the 33rd question. Brief the life cycle of an applet. So the answer for this question is, the life cycle of an applet basically involves the following stages. The first stage is the initialization stage, next is the start stage, third is the stop stage, fourth is destroy, and finally we have paint. Now the next question is, why are generics used in Java? So the answer for this question is, compile time type safety is provided by using generics in Java. So this approach allows the users to catch unnecessary invalid inputs at the time of compilation. Generic methods and classes help programmers to specify a single method declaration, a set of related methods, or with a single class declaration, a set of related types. So followed by this, we have our next question. Explain externalizable interface. So the answer for this question is, the externalizable interface helps with the control over the process of serialization. The externalization interface incorporates read external and write external methods. So we have listened to a new term here, which is serialization. So what exactly is serialization? Serialization is a process of sending your Java code or Java project from one computer system to a different computer system. So basically, if you wanted to execute some kind of Java program from a different location, then you serialize this particular code to a different location where you actually want to execute, and this particular process of transferring your code is called as serialization. Now the next question is, explain daemon thread. So the answer for this question is, the daemon thread can be defined as a thread with least responsibility. The daemon thread is designed to run in a background during the process of garbage collection in Java. The setDaemon method is used to create the daemon thread in Java programming language. So we have our next question now. Explain the term enumeration in Java. So the answer for this question is enumeration or enum is an interface in Java. Enum allows the sequential access of elements stored in a collection in Java. Now the next question is, why is Java considered as a dynamic programming language? So the answer for this question is Java was designed to adapt to an evolving environment. Java programs include large amount of runtime information that is actually used to resolve access to the objects in real time. So this is the reason why Java is considered as dynamic programming language. Now followed by this we have our next question. Can you run a code before executing the main method? So the answer for this question is yes, we can execute any code even before the main method. We will be using the static block of code in the class when creating the objects at load time of the class. Any statements within the static block of the code will execute it once while loading the class, even before the creation of objects in the main method. Now the last question in the intermediate section is how many times the finalize method is called? So the answer for this question is the finalize method is called by the garbage collector. So for every object, the garbage collector calls the finalize method just for once. Now with this, let's enter the advanced segment of interview questions based on Java. So the first question in the advanced segment is, can the keywords this and super be used together? So the answer for this question is no. This and super keywords should be used in the first statement in the class constructor. So the following code segment will give you a better idea. So you can see that we have used the keyword super and this in the class constructor. That is the first class constructor. Now this is how you can use super keyword and this keyword together in case if you wanted to use. So with this, let's continue with the next question in the advanced level. So the next question says explain JSP page. So the answer for this question is JSP is basically an abbreviation for Java Servlet page. So the Java Servlet page consists of two types of text. The first is the static data and the second one is Java Servlet page elements. Now the next question is explain JDBC. So the answer is JDBC is an abbreviation for Java Database Connector. JDBC is an abstract layer used to establish connectivity between any existing database and to a Java application. Next question is explain the various directives of JSP. So the directives are instructions processed by JSP engine. After the JSP page is compiled into a servlet, directives are used to set page level instructions, insert data from external files and specify custom tag libraries. Directives are defined between the following symbols. So these are the symbols that are used to specify the directives in a JSP page. The different types of directives are shown as below. There are three types of directives. They are include directive, page directive and taglib directive. So include directive includes a file and merges the content of the file with the current page. The page directive is used to define specific attributes in the JSP page like error page and buffer. The taglib directory is used to declare a custom tag library which is used in the JSP page. Followed by that we have the next question. What are observer and observable classes? So the answer for this question is objects that subclass the observable class maintain a list of observers. When an observable object is updated, it invokes the update method of each of the observers to notify that the observers that it has changed its state. The observer interface is implemented by objects that observe observable objects. Might be a little confusing, but you need to read this answer once again. You can pause it and you can read this answer once again so that you can get a brief understanding of this. Followed by that, we have the next question. What is session management in Java? So the answer for this question is, a session is essentially defined as the dynamic stage of a random conversation between the client and the server. The essential communication channel includes the string of responses and requests from both sides. Typically, the most popular way of implementing session management is the employment of a session ID in the communicative discourse of the client and the server. The next question is, brief about Spring Framework. Spring Framework is basically the framework of frameworks. Now, the answer for this question is, Spring is essentially defined as the application framework and inversion of control container for Java. Basically, the chief purpose of Spring Framework is to create enterprise applications in Java. Also, it is especially useful to keep in mind that the central features of the Spring Framework are essentially conducive to any Java application. So the next question is, explain JCA in Java. So the answer for this question is, JCA is basically an abbreviation for Java Cryptography Architecture. So JCA provides a platform that gives architecture and APIs for encryption as well as decryption. JCA is used by the developer to combine the application with the security measure. It also helps in performing the third-party security rules. It uses the hash table, encryption message digest, etc. to implement the security. So the next question is, explain JPA in Java. So the answer for this question is, JPA stands as an abbreviation for Java Persistence API. The JPA is enabling us to create the persistence layer for desktop and web applications. JPA deals with the following: Java Persistence API, Query Language, Java Persistence Criteria API, Object Mapping Metadata, etc. So the last question in our list is, explain the different authentications in Java servlets. So the answer for this question is, authentication options available in servlets are as follows. The first one is basic authentication. So the basic authentication consists of username and password provided by the client to authenticate as the user. The second one is form-based authentication. In this particular type of authentication, the login form is made by the programmer by using HTML. Followed by that, we have the third type of authentication, that is digest authentication. Digest authentication is similar to basic authentication, but in this the passwords are encrypted using hash formula. This makes digest more secured. And lastly, we have the client certificate authentication. The client certificate authentication requires that each client accessing the resource has a certificate that it sends to authenticate itself. This requires SSL protocol.
And with that, we have come to the end of this Java project's full course. If you enjoyed watching this video, then do give it a thumbs up. If you have any doubts regarding any of the topics we have covered in this video, then please feel free to drop them down in the comment section below, and our team of experts will help you as soon as possible. So thank you so much for being here today. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep learning and stay tuned to Simplilearn for more amazing.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.